Victoria Hale sat alone in the hospital corridor at 2 a.m., her hands trembling as the oncologist delivered news that would change everything. Stage 3. Aggressive treatment required immediately. No family to call. No one waiting at home. Just her, the woman who built an empire but forgot to build a life. 2 floors below, Daniel Carter was collecting his daughter's stuffed rabbit from the back seat of his car, trying to explain to an 8-year-old why mommy didn't love daddy anymore. Neither knew that in 6 weeks, their shattered worlds would collide in the most unexpected way. This is their story, a journey from brokenness to belonging, from loneliness to love, from survival to something worth living for. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below and hit that like button. I want to see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The divorce papers sat on Daniel Carter's kitchen counter for 3 days before he could bring himself to sign them. They weren't particularly thick, just 17 pages that dismantled 8 years of marriage, a shared home, joint bank accounts, and every assumption he'd made about his future. His ex-wife Jennifer had already signed her portions in neat, decisive blue ink. Her signature looked confident, final, like she'd been planning this for months and felt nothing but relief when it was over. Daniel's hand shook as he held the pen. Sophie was at his parents' house, thank God. He couldn't let her see him like this. Couldn't let her watch him break down over documents that transformed him from a husband into a divorced father with custody every other weekend and alternating holidays. The thought of explaining alternating holidays to an 8-year-old made his chest feel like it was caving in. He signed the last page at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, then sat in the dark living room until dawn. The apartment felt wrong without Sophie's toys scattered across the floor, without her bedtime negotiations echoing from down the hall, without the small breathing sounds she made when she slept. Jennifer had taken most of the furniture when she moved out 6 weeks earlier, taken it to the house she now shared with Marcus, her personal trainer turned boyfriend. The speed of her replacement relationship would have been funny if it didn't make Daniel feel so utterly disposable. 8 years, gone in 17 pages. When morning finally came, Daniel showered, dressed in the same gray suit he'd worn 100 times, and drove to the office like nothing had changed. Because what else was he supposed to do? Fall apart? He had a daughter depending on him. He had a job that barely tolerated distraction. He had bills and responsibilities and a life that demanded he keep moving even when every part of him wanted to stop. The Wellington and Cross investment firm occupied floors 32 through 36 of the Bradshaw Tower in downtown Philadelphia. Daniel had worked there for 6 years as a senior financial analyst, long enough to earn respect, not quite long enough to break into the executive tier where the real money and power lived. He was good at his job, meticulous, reliable, the kind of employee who showed up early, stayed late, and never caused problems. Today, he was 15 minutes late. Rough night? Marcus Chen, his cubicle neighbor, glanced up from his computer screen as Daniel dropped his briefcase beside his desk. Something like that. Daniel powered on his laptop and avoided eye contact. Marcus was a good guy, sharp, ambitious, recently engaged, the kind of person who talked enthusiastically about wedding venues and honeymoon destinations. 3 months ago, Daniel had enjoyed those conversations. Now they felt like salt in an open wound. Listen, man, if you need anything, I'm fine. Daniel's voice came out sharper than intended. Sorry, just need coffee. He escaped to the break room before Marcus could press further. The office coffee was terrible as always, burnt and bitter, like someone had programmed the machine to produce liquid disappointment. Daniel poured himself a cup anyway and stood by the window overlooking the city. 40 stories below, people moved through their lives with purpose and direction. From up here, they looked like they knew exactly where they were going. Daniel had no idea where he was going anymore. Mr. Carter! The voice behind him was cool, professional, and unmistakable. He turned to find Victoria Hale standing in the doorway of the break room, her tailored black suit sharp enough to cut glass, her expression revealing nothing. She was 41, impeccably composed, and widely regarded as the most brilliant and terrifying executive in the company. People didn't chat casually with Victoria Hale. They prepared presentations for her, responded to her emails within the hour, and tried very hard not to make mistakes that would bring them to her attention. Miss Hale. Daniel straightened automatically, suddenly aware of how exhausted he must look. I didn't see you there. Your wedding ring is gone. She stated it like a fact, not a question. Daniel's hand moved unconsciously to his left ring finger, where a pale strip of skin marked where the gold band had been for 8 years. He'd taken it off last night after signing the papers. Thrown it in a drawer. Tried not to think about what it meant. Yes, he managed. Victoria studied him for a moment with those sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. She didn't offer condolences or platitudes. She didn't ask if he was okay or suggest he take time off. Instead, she said, "Come to my office at 2 o'clock. I have something for you." Then she was gone, leaving Daniel standing alone with his terrible coffee and a growing sense of dread. Victoria Hale's office occupied the entire southwest corner of the 36th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, and everything inside, from the minimalist desk to the leather chairs to the abstract art on the walls, spoke of control, precision, and power. Daniel had been in this office exactly 3 times in 6 years. Each visit had been brief and professional. This one felt different. "Sit." Victoria gestured to one of the chairs across from her desk. He sat. She remained standing, arms crossed, looking out at the skyline like she was calculating its worth. For a long moment she didn't speak. "Do you know why I asked you here?" she finally said. "No, ma'am." "Because you're broken right now, and broken people make interesting decisions." She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "They either collapse completely or they surprise everyone by becoming something stronger. I'm betting you're the second type." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. Victoria moved to her desk and pulled out a file folder, thick with documents. "The Donovan account. Are you familiar with it?" He was. Everyone in the firm knew the Donovan account, a high net worth client with complex international holdings and a notorious reputation for being impossible to please. 3 analysts had already failed to manage the relationship. The last one quit after a particularly brutal quarterly review. "I'm familiar," Daniel said carefully. "Good. It's yours now." She slid the folder across the desk. "Mr. Donovan is demanding, unreasonable, and will test every limit you have. He fires people regularly and enjoys doing it. He's also worth $43 million, and if we lose him, the board will ask very pointed questions about why." Daniel stared at the folder like it might explode. "Why me?" "Because you need something to fight for that isn't your personal life." Victoria's voice was matter-of-fact, almost clinical. "Grief makes people soft. Anger makes them sharp. You're angry right now, even if you don't want to admit it. Use it. Turn it into something productive." She was right, and he hated that she was right. "What if I fail?" he asked. "Then you fail and we move on, but I don't think you will." She returned to the window, dismissing him with her posture. "Mr. Donovan expects a call by end of business today. Don't disappoint him." Daniel stood, file in hand, feeling like he'd just been thrown into deep water without a life jacket. "Ms. Hale?" He paused at the door. "Why do you care if I collapse or not?" She didn't turn around. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything that mattered and have to rebuild from nothing. And because talent shouldn't be wasted on despair. Now go to work, Mr. Carter." The Donovan account consumed Daniel's life for the next 6 weeks. Richard Donovan was every bit as difficult as advertised, demanding detailed reports at odd hours, questioning every investment decision, shifting his priorities without warning. He had the temperament of a man who'd spent his life getting exactly what he wanted and had no patience for anything less than perfection. But Daniel discovered something unexpected. He was good at this. Maybe it was because he'd stopped caring about failure. Maybe it was because managing Donovan's chaos felt easier than managing his own emotional wreckage. Or maybe Victoria had been right. Anger did make him sharper. Whatever the reason, Daniel approached the account with a focused intensity that surprised even himself. He worked late every night, sometimes until the cleaning crew arrived. He analyzed Donovan's portfolio from every angle, found inefficiencies the previous analysts had missed, identified opportunities they'd overlooked. When Donovan called at 6 a.m. demanding explanations, Daniel had answers ready. When Donovan shifted strategies mid-quarter, Daniel adapted without complaint. Slowly, impossibly, it started working. "I have to admit, Carter, I didn't think you'd last a week." Donovan's voice crackled through the phone during their 3rd monthly review. "But you've actually improved my returns by 4%. How the hell did you do that?" "Paid attention to what you said you wanted, sir, and delivered it." Daniel kept his voice professional, hiding his satisfaction. Huh. Novel concept. Keep it up. The line went dead. For Donovan, that was high praise. Marcus Chen appeared at Daniel's cubicle later that afternoon, looking genuinely impressed. Dude, how are you not dead yet? I heard Donovan made the last guy cry. Different approach, Daniel said simply. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. People are noticing. Marcus lowered his voice, including Hale. She mentioned your name in the executive meeting yesterday, in a good way. Daniel glanced toward the elevators that led to the 36th floor. He'd only seen Victoria twice since she'd given him the account. Both times in passing, both times with nothing more than a professional nod of acknowledgement. She didn't check on his progress, didn't ask for updates, didn't offer encouragement or criticism. She'd thrown him into the deep end and trusted him to swim. For some reason, that mattered more than any words of support could have. The call came on a Thursday evening in late October. Daniel was reviewing portfolio projections when his office phone rang with an internal extension. Victoria Hale's direct line. Carter. Her voice was its usual controlled calm, but there was something underneath it, a threat of exhaustion he'd never heard before. I need to ask you something. It's personal, and you're free to decline. Daniel sat up straighter. Victoria Hale didn't ask personal favors. Of course. What do you need? There was a pause. Then, I need a driver. Medical appointments. Twice a week for the next several months. Early mornings starting at 6 a.m. I'll pay you for your time, obviously. You don't need to pay me, he said automatically. Then the rest of her words registered. Medical appointments? Are you all right? Another pause, longer this time. No, she said finally, but I'm getting treatment, and I can't drive myself afterward. The medications make it unsafe. I've been using a car service, but the drivers change constantly, and I'm tired of explaining my situation to strangers. I need someone reliable, someone who understands discretion. Daniel's chest tightened. Cancer. She didn't say the word, but he knew. When do you need me to start? Monday. Pennsylvania Oncology Center, 6 a.m. You'll need to block out 3 hours. Her voice was steady again, back to business. If this creates a conflict with your schedule, it doesn't, he interrupted. I'll be there. Thank you, Carter. She sounded relieved. I'll send you the address. The line went dead before he could respond. Daniel sat in his darkened office for a long time after that call, staring at nothing and trying to process what he'd just learned. Victoria Hale, brilliant, powerful, untouchable Victoria Hale, was sick, and she'd asked him for help. Not her family, not her friends, him. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of November weather that promised winter was coming whether you were ready or not. Daniel pulled his car up to the address Victoria had sent, a modern medical building in University City with large windows and that carefully neutral architecture designed to be calming. He texted her that he'd arrived and waited, engine running, heat on. She emerged from the building's entrance 5 minutes later, wrapped in a long black coat, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that made her look younger and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. She moved carefully, deliberately, like someone conserving energy. Daniel got out and opened the passenger door. You don't need to do that, Victoria said, but she didn't sound annoyed, just tired. Force of habit. My daughter likes the gesture. Something flickered across Victoria's face at the mention of Sophie, but she climbed in without comment. They drove in silence through the early morning streets, past coffee shops just opening, past joggers determined to maintain their routines despite the cold. Daniel didn't try to fill the quiet with meaningless conversation. He just drove, letting her have whatever space she needed. The oncology center was in Chestnut Hill, a 25-minute drive that felt both too long and too short. You can wait in the main lobby, Victoria said as they pulled into the parking garage. There's coffee. Terrible coffee, but coffee. I'll text you when I'm finished. I'll be here, Daniel promised. She nodded and disappeared through the glass doors. Daniel found the lobby, bright, modern, filled with art that was probably meant to be hopeful, and settled into one of the uncomfortable chairs with a cup of the promised terrible coffee. Around him, other people waited. Some looked scared. Some looked exhausted. Some looked like they'd been doing this so long they'd stopped feeling anything at all. He thought about Victoria sitting somewhere in this building, hooked up to machines that pumped poison into her veins to kill the poison already there. He thought about her sitting through board meetings and financial reviews while fighting this battle no one knew about. He thought about how lonely that must be. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, his phone buzzed. Ready, same place. Daniel met her at the main entrance. She looked pale, moving slower than before, but her posture was still straight, her expression still controlled. How do you feel? He asked as he opened the car door. Like I've been hit by a truck filled with chemicals. She settled into the seat with visible relief. But I'm still standing, so I'll count it as a win. They drove back through the city, the morning rush hour now in full swing. Victoria closed her eyes and leaned her head against the window, and Daniel focused on making the ride as smooth as possible, avoiding potholes and sharp turns. Why did you say yes? Victoria asked suddenly, her eyes still closed. Because you asked, Daniel said simply. I gave you an impossible client account. I've never been particularly kind to you. We're not friends. No, he agreed. But you gave me something to fight for when I needed it most. And now you need someone to fight for you. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. Victoria opened her eyes and looked at him for a long moment. You're a good man, Daniel Carter. It was the first time she'd ever used his first name. The drives became routine over the following weeks. Twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 a.m., Daniel would pick Victoria up from her penthouse apartment building downtown and drive her to treatment. They developed a rhythm, quiet on the way there, slightly more talkative on the way back, depending on how she felt. Some days she could barely keep her eyes open. Other days she seemed almost like her normal self. They didn't talk about work. That was an unspoken rule. Instead, they talked about everything else. Daniel told her about Sophie, about her obsession with astronomy, her determination to become the first person to visit Mars, her habit of naming every stuffed animal she owned after historical figures. Last week she informed me that Alexander the Great Bear has declared war on Napoleon Bunny over territory disputes in the Pillow Fort, he said, making Victoria laugh for the first time. She sounds extraordinary, Victoria said. She is. She's the best thing I ever did. Even though the marriage didn't work out? Especially because it didn't. Daniel merged onto the highway. Jennifer and I were wrong for each other from the start. We just didn't want to admit it. But Sophie, she's perfect, and I get to be her dad. That's enough. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I was married once, long time ago, 20 years. Daniel glanced at her surprised. She'd never mentioned this before. What happened? He wanted children. I wanted a career. We both got what we wanted, just not with each other. She stared out the window. He remarried. Has 3 kids now, lives in Connecticut, coaches Little League, sends me a Christmas card every year like we're old friends who just drifted apart instead of 2 people who destroyed each other trying to want the same things. Do you regret it? Every single day. Her voice was soft, almost inaudible. I built this incredible career. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. I sit in boardrooms with people who fear and respect me, and I come home every night to an empty apartment and wonder what the hell it was all for. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. The vulnerability in her voice was so raw, so unlike the Victoria Hale everyone else knew. And now this. She gestured vaguely at herself. Cancer at 41. No partner, no children. No one to call when the doctor gives you news that rewrites your entire future. Just me and a very expensive health insurance policy. You called me, Daniel pointed out. I hired you. It's not the same thing. Isn't it? He pulled into her apartment building's parking garage. Maybe it doesn't matter how it started. Maybe it just matters that someone shows up. Victoria looked at him then, really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. Maybe, she said quietly. What? The weeks turned into months, and Daniel's life found a strange new equilibrium. He had Sophie every other weekend and Wednesday nights. Those were his favorite times, making pancakes that never came out quite right, helping with math homework he barely remembered, watching her set up her telescope on his tiny apartment balcony and explain the difference between planets and stars with the confidence of someone who already knew her life's purpose. Dad, did you know that Mars has 2 moons named Phobos and Deimos? Sophie informed him one Wednesday evening, her eye pressed to the telescope eyepiece. "I did not know that," Daniel lied. She'd told him at least 6 times. "They're named after the Greek gods of fear and terror. Isn't that cool?" "Very cool, sweetheart. When I go to Mars, I'm going to visit both of them and take pictures for you. I'll add them to the fridge." She pulled back from the telescope and grinned at him, that gap-toothed smile that made everything else in the world seem manageable. "You're silly, Dad. That's my job." On the days he didn't have Sophie, Daniel worked and drove Victoria to treatment and tried not to think too hard about how much he looked forward to those quiet morning drives. They'd become the most honest conversations in his life, more real than anything he discussed with coworkers, more substantial than his awkward exchanges with Jennifer about pickup schedules and permission slips. Victoria told him about her childhood in Boston, daughter of an alcoholic father and a mother who worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat, about putting herself through business school, about her first job at a tiny investment firm in New York, about clawing her way up through an industry that didn't want women at the top. "I made myself indispensable," she said during one drive. "I worked harder, stayed later, knew more than anyone else in the room. I made it impossible for them to ignore me." "And it worked," Daniel said. "It worked." She was quiet for a moment, but somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be anything except indispensable. Forgot how to be a person instead of a resume. Daniel understood that better than she knew. They talked about movies neither of them had time to watch, books they meant to read, places they wanted to visit someday. They discovered they both loved old jazz music and terrible action movies and the kind of thunderstorms that knocked out power and forced you to light candles. Small things, normal things, the kind of conversations that shouldn't matter but somehow did. What they didn't talk about was what was happening between them. But Daniel felt it anyway, in the way Victoria smiled more easily around him now, and how she sometimes touched his shoulder when thanking him for the drive, in the moments when their eyes met and held just a fraction too long. He told himself it didn't mean anything. She was his boss, going through a medical crisis, and he was just being supportive. That's all this was. He was a very good liar. The shift happened on a Tuesday in late January. Victoria's treatment that morning had been particularly rough. A new medication protocol that left her shaking and nauseous. Daniel drove more carefully than usual, avoiding every bump and curve, while she sat with her eyes closed and her hand pressed to her stomach. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "This is humiliating." "It's not. It's human." He kept his eyes on the road. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Victoria." She laughed weakly. "Yes, I do. That's the job." "Maybe that's the problem." He pulled into her building's garage and came around to help her out of the car. She leaned on him more than usual, and he could feel how much she was trembling. "I've got you," he said softly. "Just take your time." They made it to the elevator, then down the hall to her apartment door. Victoria fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking too much to get the right one in the lock. "Here." Daniel gently took the keys and unlocked the door, then helped her inside. The apartment was exactly what he'd expected. Immaculate, expensive, impersonal. Everything matched. Nothing looked lived in. It was more like a hotel suite than a home. "Thank you," Victoria managed. "You can go now. I'll be fine." "I'm making you tea first." Daniel was already moving to the kitchen, filling the kettle, searching through cabinets for cups. "Daniel, you don't have to." "I know." "But I'm going to anyway." He found peppermint tea and honey, made 2 cups, and brought them to where Victoria had collapsed on the couch. She looked so small sitting there, wrapped in a blanket, all her usual armor stripped away. "I hate this," she said suddenly. "I hate being weak. I hate needing help. I hate that you're seeing me like this." Daniel sat down beside her. "I don't see weakness. I see someone fighting like hell to survive. That's the strongest thing there is. You don't understand. My whole life I've been in control of everything, and now I can't even open my own front door without help. Control is overrated." He handed her the tea. "Some of the best things in life happen when you stop trying to manage every detail and just let someone help you." Victoria looked at him over the rim of her cup, and something in her eyes made his breath catch. "How did you get so wise?" she asked softly. "Had my heart broken and my life torn apart. Turns out it's educational." She set down her tea and reached for his hand. Her fingers were cold, still trembling slightly, but her grip was firm. "I need to tell you something," she said. Daniel's heart started beating faster. "Okay. These drives, these conversations, they've become the best part of my day, the only part that feels real." She met his eyes. "And I know that's probably inappropriate. You work for me. This started as a professional arrangement, but I can't keep pretending I don't look forward to seeing you every Tuesday and Thursday more than anything else in my week." Daniel couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel her hand in his and the weight of everything she wasn't quite saying. "It's not just you," he said finally. "I feel it too." "We can't," she started. "I know. This is impossible. I know that too. But I'm tired of impossible being the reason I don't get to have anything that matters." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm 41 years old, fighting cancer, sitting in an apartment that feels like a mausoleum, and the only person who makes me feel alive is my employee who drives me to treatment twice a week. And I'm supposed to be professional about that?" Daniel set down his own cup and turned to face her fully. "What do you want, Victoria?" "I want to be honest. I want to stop pretending. I want—" She broke off, looking away. "What?" he pressed gently. She looked back at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I want you to stay. Not just for the tea. I want you to stay because you want to, not because it's kind or professional or the right thing to do. I want to stop being alone." Daniel felt something break open inside his chest, something that had been locked down since he signed those divorce papers, since his marriage fell apart, since he started believing he was fundamentally unlovable. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. And then, before he could second-guess himself, before fear or professionalism or common sense could interfere, he leaned forward and kissed her. Victoria made a small sound of surprise, then melted into him, her hands coming up to grip his shirt like she was afraid he might disappear. The kiss was soft, tentative, loaded with months of unspoken longing and the strange tenderness that grows between two broken people who finally understand each other. When they pulled apart, Victoria was crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm a mess." "So am I," Daniel said. "Maybe that's okay." She laughed through her tears, and Daniel pulled her close, letting her rest her head against his shoulder while she cried, really cried, the kind of deep, shaking sobs that come from holding everything in for too long. He didn't try to fix it or make it better. He just held her while she fell apart, knowing that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is let someone see them break. Outside, the winter sun was rising over Philadelphia, casting long shadows across the city. Inside, two people who'd spent too long being strong finally allowed themselves to be weak. And somehow, impossibly, it felt like the beginning of something that might actually be strong enough to last. They stayed like that for a long time, Victoria's head against Daniel's shoulder, his arms wrapped around her, the morning light gradually filling her pristine apartment with warmth it had probably never felt before. Eventually, her tears stopped, but neither of them moved. The silence between them felt sacred, like speaking would break whatever fragile thing had just formed. "I should let you go," Victoria finally said, though she made no effort to pull away. "You have work. The Donovan account won't manage itself." "Donovan can wait." Daniel's voice was steady. "This is more important." She lifted her head to look at him, her eyes red-rimmed but clearer than he'd seen them in weeks. "Is it? We just crossed every professional line that exists. I'm your boss, Daniel. This could destroy both our careers." "I know. And you don't care?" He considered the question seriously, because it deserved that. "I care, but not enough to pretend this isn't happening. Not enough to go back to polite distance and professional boundaries when what I actually want is this." Victoria touched his face, her fingers gentle against his jaw. "You're supposed to be smarter than this." "Probably. But I've spent the last 6 months being smart and careful and doing everything right, and it didn't make me any less lonely." He caught her hand, held it against his cheek. "You're the first person since my divorce who makes me feel like I'm not just going through the motions. Like there's something worth showing up for besides my daughter and my job. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone who's barely holding herself together." "Then we'll hold each other together. Seems fair?" She laughed softly, and the sound made something warm bloom in Daniel's chest. When did you become such a romantic? About 5 minutes ago, apparently. Victoria kissed him again, slower this time, like she was memorizing the shape of his mouth, the way his breath caught when her fingers tangled in his hair. When they broke apart, she was smiling, genuinely smiling, not the controlled expression she wore in board meetings, but something real and unguarded. "Stay for breakfast," she said. "I probably have eggs somewhere. Or we could order something. I haven't actually cooked in this kitchen since I moved in." "When was that? 4 years ago?" Daniel laughed. "Definitely ordering something then." They ended up on her couch with Vietnamese takeout from a place down the street, eating directly from the containers because Victoria admitted she only owned 4 plates and they all matched her china set too perfectly to actually use. It was so normal, so domestic, so completely unlike anything Daniel would have imagined doing with Victoria Hale a year ago. "Tell me about Sophie," Victoria said, expertly managing her chopsticks despite the medication still making her hands unsteady. "What's she like?" "Really like. Not just the proud father version." Daniel smiled around a mouthful of pho. "She's stubborn. Impossibly stubborn. When she decides she wants something, she doesn't give up until she gets it or until I can prove to her with actual scientific evidence why it's impossible." "Sounds familiar," Victoria said dryly. "She's also kind. Really genuinely kind in a way that makes me wonder how Jennifer and I managed to produce someone so much better than both of us." He set down his container. "Last month she used all her birthday money to buy supplies for the animal shelter because she read that they were low on donations. Didn't ask permission, just did it. Then looked at me like I was crazy when I tried to praise her for it. Said it wasn't special, it was just obvious." Victoria's expression softened. "She sounds extraordinary." "She is. And terrifying, because every day I wake up knowing I'm responsible for not screwing up this perfect person, and I have no idea what I'm doing." "You're doing better than you think." Victoria reached over and squeezed his hand. "The fact that you worry about it means you care. That's most of the battle." They talked for hours, trading stories and fears and dreams they'd never spoken aloud before. Daniel learned that Victoria had wanted to be a pianist as a child, that she still played sometimes when she couldn't sleep, that she'd given it up because her mother needed her to focus on practical careers that would pay bills. Victoria learned that Daniel had almost become a teacher instead of a financial analyst, that he still tutored kids in math on weekends sometimes, that he'd chosen finance because it seemed safer and more stable, and he'd been too afraid to risk anything else. "Do you regret it?" Victoria asked. "Sometimes. But then I think about how I wouldn't have Sophie if I'd made different choices, and that makes everything else worth it." "Even Jennifer?" "Even Jennifer. We were wrong for each other, but we made something right together." He looked at Victoria carefully. "Do you regret not having children?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "I told myself for years that I didn't want them, that I was too focused on my career, too ambitious, too selfish to be a mother. And maybe all of that was true." She looked up, her eyes bright. "But I think mostly I was just scared. Scared of failing at something that mattered. Scared of loving something more than I loved my job. And now I'm 41 with cancer and an empty apartment, and I wonder if I was just a coward." "You're not a coward," Daniel said firmly. "You're the bravest person I know." Brave people don't hide in their offices for 20 years avoiding real life. Brave people fight through cancer treatment twice a week and still show up to run a company. Brave people admit when they're scared instead of pretending everything's fine. He moved closer to her. "You're allowed to have regrets, Victoria. That doesn't make you a coward. It makes you human." She leaned into him, and they sat together in the afternoon light streaming through her floor-to-ceiling windows, two broken people trying to figure out if their pieces might fit together into something whole. When Daniel finally left that evening, he felt different, lighter, like he'd been carrying a weight he didn't know was there until Victoria helped him set it down. He drove home thinking about her smile, her laugh, the way she'd kissed him like he was something precious instead of something temporary. He thought about Sophie, about the life he was building, about the possibility that maybe, happiness wasn't something that happened to other people. His phone buzzed as he pulled into his apartment complex. "Thank you for staying, for everything. V." Daniel smiled and typed back, "Thank you for asking me to. See you Thursday. I'll be counting the hours. He read that message 3 times before going inside, letting himself believe it was real. The next morning at the office, everything felt surrealistically normal. Marcus was complaining about wedding caterers. The coffee was still terrible. The Donovan account still demanded constant attention. But Daniel moved through it all with a strange sense of calm, like he'd finally figured out a secret everyone else was still struggling to learn. Victoria appeared at his cubicle around 10, immaculate in a navy suit, her face carefully neutral. "Mr. Carter, do you have the quarterly projections ready for the executive review?" "On your desk by noon, Ms. Hale." "Excellent." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and the stakeholder dinner next week. I'll need you there. The Donovan account is becoming a showcase for the firm." "Of course." Their eyes met for just a fraction of a second, long enough for Daniel to see the warmth there, the private smile she was hiding from everyone else. And then she was gone, heels clicking across the floor, every inch the powerful CEO. Marcus whistled low. "Man, she must really trust you with that account. Hale doesn't usually bring analysts to stakeholder dinners." "Just doing my job," Daniel said mildly. But his heart was racing, because he knew what Victoria had really just done. She'd given him a reason to be by her side in a public, professional setting, a way to spend an evening together without raising suspicions. It was careful, clever, and exactly the kind of strategic thinking that made her so formidable. It was also deeply romantic, and Daniel couldn't stop smiling about it. The stakeholder dinner was at an upscale restaurant in Rittenhouse Square, the kind of place with more forks than any reasonable meal required, and wine lists thicker than most novels. Daniel arrived early, dressed in his best suit, nervous in a way he hadn't been since his first day at the firm. Victoria was already there, holding court with 3 senior partners and a client Daniel recognized from financial news reports. She looked stunning in a black dress that somehow managed to be both perfectly professional and devastatingly elegant. When she saw him, something flickered in her expression: pleasure, warmth, desire, before she smoothed it away. "Mr. Carter, excellent timing. I was just telling everyone about your work with the Donovan account." The evening became a careful dance. In public, they were consummate professionals, Victoria directing conversation, Daniel providing insights about portfolio management, both of them playing their roles perfectly. But underneath the table, Victoria's foot would occasionally brush against his. When reaching for water glasses, their fingers would touch. Small moments of contact that no one else noticed, but that sent electricity racing up Daniel's spine. "You've done impressive work," Margaret Foster, one of the senior partners, said to Daniel over dessert. "Richard Donovan is notoriously difficult, but his satisfaction ratings have never been higher." "Mr. Carter has a gift for reading what clients actually need versus what they think they want," Victoria said smoothly. "It's a rare skill." "We should discuss fast-tracking him for senior analyst," Margaret continued. "Someone with his abilities shouldn't be stuck in a cubicle." Daniel saw Victoria's expression remain perfectly neutral, but he knew her well enough now to catch the slight tension in her shoulders. A promotion would be good for his career, but would make their relationship even more complicated. "Let's revisit that conversation after the next quarterly review," Victoria said. "I want to ensure we're making decisions based on sustained performance rather than single accounts." It was a masterful deflection, protecting Daniel's advancement while buying them time to figure out what they were doing. The dinner ended around 10. Daniel waited until the other guests had departed, then found Victoria in the restaurant's lobby, checking her phone. "That was," he started. "Excruciating," she finished. 3 hours of pretending you're just an employee when all I wanted to do was—" She cut herself off, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "When you wanted to do what?" Daniel stepped closer, emboldened by the privacy. "This." She kissed him quickly, a brief press of lips that felt stolen and precious. "I have a car waiting. Come home with me." Victoria said, "I know all the reasons we shouldn't. I know this is complicated and messy and probably a terrible idea." Her eyes searched his face. "But I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of pretending, and I don't want to spend tonight alone in that apartment when you could be there instead." Daniel thought about the risks, the complications, the 100 ways this could go wrong. Then he thought about Victoria's smile, her laugh, the way she looked at him like he was someone worth choosing. "Let me get my car," he said. They drove separately to her building, maintaining the appearance of propriety even as they both knew exactly what they were doing. Daniel parked in the guest section and met Victoria at the elevator, where she immediately pulled him close, kissing him with an intensity that made his knees weak. "I've been wanting to do that all night," she murmured against his mouth. "Just tonight?" Daniel managed. "All week, all month, since the first time you showed up to drive me to treatment and didn't look at me like I was dying." The elevator doors opened onto her floor, and they stumbled down the hall to her apartment, barely making it inside before Victoria was pulling off his jacket, her fingers working at his tie. "Are you sure?" Daniel caught her hands, needing her to be certain, despite how much he wanted this. "We can slow down. We can—" "Daniel." She looked at him with absolute clarity. "I have spent my entire adult life being sure, being careful, making the smart choice. And it got me a corner office and an empty life. I don't want to be sure anymore. I just want to be with you." So he kissed her and let himself fall into the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of wanting someone who wanted him back. They made love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with the tenderness of two people who knew how fragile good things could be. Victoria's skin was soft under his hands, marked in places by medical procedures and the ravages of treatment, but beautiful in the way real things are beautiful, imperfect and honest and utterly human. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her bed, the city lights casting shadows across the ceiling. "I haven't done this in a long time," Victoria said quietly. "Haven't let anyone see me like this." "Me either. Not since—" Daniel paused. "Actually, not even with Jennifer toward the end. We were already so far apart." "Do you still love her?" "No. I probably stopped loving her years before either of us admitted it." He traced patterns on Victoria's shoulder. "I think we both just got comfortable being disappointed." "That's heartbreaking." "It was. But it also taught me what I don't want. I don't want comfortable disappointment. I don't want going through the motions. I want—" He stopped, suddenly aware of how much he was about to reveal. "What?" Victoria prompted gently. "This. You. Something that feels real even if it's complicated." She kissed his shoulder. "It is real, and it is complicated. We're going to have to figure out how to navigate that." "I know. The board would have very strong opinions about the CEO dating an employee." "I know that too. We could keep it secret for a while, just until—" She trailed off, because they both knew there was no good end to that sentence. Until when? Until the firm decided it was acceptable. Until one of them left? Until the complications became unbearable? "Or we could just deal with it as it comes," Daniel suggested. "Stop trying to plan every detail and just see what happens." Victoria laughed. "You're asking a woman who color codes her closet to stop planning? That's asking a lot." "You color code your closet?" "By season and function. Don't judge me." Daniel pulled her closer, grinning. "I'm absolutely judging you. That's insane. It's sufficient. It's terrifying." They dissolved into laughter, and Daniel marveled at how easy this felt. How right, when everything about it should have been wrong. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Daniel woke sometime before dawn to find Victoria watching him in the dim light filtering through the curtains. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Didn't want to. I kept thinking this might be a dream and I'd wake up alone." He kissed her forehead. "Not a dream. I'm really here." "For how long?" It was the question they'd both been avoiding, but it hung in the air between them now, demanding an answer. "As long as you want me," Daniel said honestly. "I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to leave." "And if things get difficult? If the board finds out? If people start talking? Then we deal with it, together." He met her eyes. "I'm not saying it'll be easy, Victoria, but I think you're worth the complications." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I'm scared," she finally admitted. "I'm scared of needing you this much. I'm scared of what happens if I get used to this and then lose it." "I'm scared too, but I think that means it matters." "When did you get so wise about relationships? I thought you just got divorced." "I did. That's exactly why I'm wise now. I know what it looks like when you're with the wrong person." He touched her face gently. "And I know what it feels like to find the right one." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Daniel, you don't have to say anything. I just need you to know that I'm all in here. Whatever that means, whatever it costs, I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you." She kissed him then, deep and slow, and full of everything she couldn't say with words. When they finally broke apart, she was crying openly. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "I thought I'd missed my chance. Chosen wrong too many times. And then you showed up to drive me to cancer treatment and somehow turned into the best thing in my life." "Best thing besides the corner office," Daniel teased gently. She laughed through her tears. "The corner office doesn't keep me warm at night." "Fair point." They stayed in bed until the sun was fully up, talking about nothing and everything, making plans they weren't sure they could keep, building a future that terrified them both. Eventually, Victoria had to get ready for work, and Daniel reluctantly dressed in yesterday's suit, knowing he'd have to go home and change before heading to the office. "This is going to be impossible to hide," Victoria said, watching him adjust his tie in her mirror. "You're going to walk into the office wearing the same suit you wore last night, and people will notice. I'll go home first, change, show up like normal. And when people ask where you were this morning, I'll tell them I had an early meeting with a client." He turned to face her. "Victoria, we'll figure this out. We don't have to have all the answers right now." She nodded, but he could see the worry in her eyes. He kissed her goodbye at her door, a long, lingering kiss that felt like a promise, and drove home through the early morning traffic, thinking about risk and reward and all the ways a person could rebuild their life from the ground up. At the office later that morning, everything felt different and exactly the same. Daniel managed the Donovan account, attended meetings, reviewed projections. Victoria swept through the floor with her usual controlled authority, never looking at him longer than professionalism demanded. But when his phone buzzed with a text during lunch, he smiled. "I miss you already. Is that pathetic?" "V, if it is, we're both pathetic." "D, dinner tonight? My place? I'll bring takeout. You'll bring yourself. I'll handle the food. You don't cook. I'll order something impressive. Don't ruin my illusion of domestic competence." Daniel laughed out loud, earning curious looks from nearby coworkers. He didn't care. That evening, he showed up at Victoria's apartment with wine and flowers. Roses, because he was apparently that kind of cliché now. And he didn't care about that either. She answered the door in jeans and a soft sweater, her hair down, looking younger and more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "You brought roses," she said, delighted. "Too much?" "Perfect." She pulled him inside and kissed him thoroughly. "I ordered Thai food. It should be here in 20 minutes, which gives us exactly enough time for—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Later, they ate pad thai straight from the containers, sitting on her couch with their legs tangled together, and Daniel thought about how his life had become something he never could have predicted 6 months ago. Divorced. Single father. Falling in love with his boss while she fought cancer. It should have been a disaster. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing he'd done in years. "Tell me about your treatment," he said. "How much longer?" Victoria set down her container. 3 more months of this protocol. Then we wait and see if it worked. If the scans are clear, I move to maintenance therapy for a year. If not," she paused. "If not, we try something else." "And the prognosis?" 70% survival rate at 5 years. 85% if the current treatment achieves full remission. She said it clinically, like she was presenting financial data. Better odds than I had 6 months ago. Those are good numbers. They're just numbers, Daniel. They don't tell you what it feels like to sit in that chair twice a week having poison pumped into your veins. They don't tell you about the nausea or the exhaustion or the fear that never completely goes away. Her voice cracked slightly. They don't tell you about lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering if you're going to die alone. Daniel pulled her close. You're not alone. Not anymore. You can't promise that. You don't know it. I know that I'm here now. I know that I'm not leaving unless you push me away. I know that whatever happens, you don't have to face it by yourself. Victoria buried her face in his shoulder, and Daniel felt her tears soaking through his shirt. He held her while she cried, while she finally let herself feel all the fear and uncertainty she'd been keeping locked away behind her professional facade. I don't want to die, she whispered. I thought I'd made peace with it. Thought I was being rational and accepting, but I don't want to die, Daniel. Not now. Not when I finally have something worth living for. Then we fight. he said simply. We fight like hell, and we don't give up, and we make every day count. She pulled back to look at him, her face blotchy and tear-stained and completely beautiful. How are you so calm about this? I'm not calm. I'm terrified. But I learned something when my marriage fell apart. He touched her face gently. I learned that you can't control everything. You can't plan for every outcome. Sometimes you just have to hold on to what matters and trust that it's enough. And if it's not, then at least we tried. At least we chose each other instead of letting fear make the choice for us. Victoria kissed him, and they made love again on her couch, slower this time, with the lights on and their eyes open, choosing to see each other completely. Afterward, as they lay together in the darkness, Victoria said quietly, I want you to meet Sophie. Daniel's heart stuttered. Are you sure? No, I'm terrified. What if she hates me? What if I'm terrible with children? What if... Sophie doesn't hate anyone, and you're not terrible at anything. He shifted to look at her. But this is a big step, Victoria. Once she meets you, once she knows you're important to me, there's no taking it back. I know, that's why I want to do it. I don't want to be a secret or a complication. I want to be part of your life, all of it. Daniel felt something fierce and protective bloom in his chest. Okay, but we do it carefully. We don't tell her we're dating right away. We let her get to know you first. What will you tell her? The truth, that you're someone important to me, someone I care about, and then we let her draw her own conclusions. She's 8. She'll figure it out immediately. Probably. She's terrifyingly perceptive. He smiled. She gets that from her mother, unfortunately. They made plans for the following weekend. Something casual, low pressure. Maybe the Natural History Museum, which Sophie loved. Maybe lunch somewhere fun. Something that would let Victoria and Sophie meet without the weight of formal introductions. As Daniel drove home that night, he felt the future opening up in ways he'd stopped believing were possible. It was fragile and uncertain and could fall apart in 100 different ways, but it was real. And it was his. And for the first time since his divorce, Daniel Carter felt like he was finally moving toward something instead of just running away from everything that had broken. The week before Sophie was supposed to meet Victoria, Daniel barely slept. He replayed every possible scenario in his mind, Sophie asking uncomfortable questions, Victoria freezing up around children, the whole thing becoming an awkward disaster that would force him to choose between the two most important people in his life. You're overthinking this, Victoria said on Thursday morning as they drove to her treatment. She looked pale but determined, her hand resting on his knee. Children are just small people. I deal with difficult people every day. Sophie's not difficult, she's just... Daniel searched for the right word. Intense. When she focuses on something, she doesn't let go until she understands it completely. And she's going to focus on you because you matter to me. That's actually kind of terrifying. Welcome to parenting. Victoria laughed, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders. She was nervous too, which somehow made him love her more. The great Victoria Hale, who commanded boardrooms and managed millions in assets without flinching, was afraid of meeting an 8-year-old girl. The treatment session was harder than usual. The new medication protocol was taking its toll, and Victoria emerged from the oncology center looking gray and exhausted. Daniel helped her into the car, his heart aching at how fragile she seemed. Maybe we should postpone this weekend, he said gently. You need to rest. No, Victoria's voice was firm despite her exhaustion. I've been postponing my life for months. Years, actually. I'm not postponing this. Victoria, Daniel, I'm sick. I'm going to be sick for a while longer. If we wait for me to feel perfect, we'll wait forever. She looked at him, her eyes fierce. I want to meet your daughter. I want to be part of your world. Please don't protect me from that. So, Saturday morning found Daniel standing outside the Natural History Museum, holding Sophie's hand and scanning the crowd for Victoria. Sophie bounced on her toes, excited about the new planetarium show, completely unaware that today was about more than dinosaurs and stars. Who are we meeting again? Sophie asked for the 3rd time. A friend of mine from work. Her name is Victoria. She's really interested in learning about space, so I thought you two might get along. Does she know about exoplanets? I'm not sure. You'll have to teach her. Sophie's face lit up with the prospect of sharing her knowledge, and Daniel felt a surge of hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe. Daniel. He turned to see Victoria approaching, dressed more casually than he'd ever seen her. Dark jeans, a soft gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger, more approachable, but he could see the uncertainty in her eyes as she looked at Sophie. Victoria, hi. Daniel squeezed Sophie's hand gently. This is my daughter, Sophie. Sophie, this is Ms. Hale. Victoria. Sophie studied Victoria with the intense, unblinking stare that made adults uncomfortable. Daniel held his breath. You're really pretty, Sophie announced finally, and you look nervous. Are you scared of museums? Victoria blinked, clearly caught off guard by the directness. Then she smiled, a real, genuine smile. A little. I haven't been to one in years. I'm worried I'll forget how they work. That's silly. Museums are easy. You just look at stuff and learn things. Sophie grabbed Victoria's hand with the same casual confidence she showed everyone. Come on, I'll show you the best parts first. And just like that, the tension broke. They spent the morning wandering through exhibits, with Sophie providing enthusiastic commentary on everything from T-Rex feeding habits to the geological timeline of Earth. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made Sophie beam with pride at her expertise. Most adults don't actually listen, Sophie confided to Victoria as they examined a meteorite display. They just pretend to pay attention while thinking about adult stuff. But you're really listening, I can tell. That's because what you're saying is fascinating, Victoria said. I had no idea meteorites could be so old, older than Earth itself. That's incredible. I know, right? Sophie's enthusiasm was infectious. When I go to Mars, I'm going to collect samples and bring them back for museums, so kids in the future can learn about space rocks from Mars instead of just Earth ones. When you go to Mars, Victoria repeated, not if. Daniel caught her eye and smiled. She was getting it. They had lunch at the museum cafe, and Daniel watched as Sophie and Victoria discussed planetary colonization with the seriousness of two scientists planning an actual mission. Sophie drew diagrams on napkins, explaining her theories about sustainable habitats. Victoria asked thoughtful questions about oxygen generation and food production. You'd need really good engineers, Victoria said. Victoria Boskite. People who can fix things when they break, because you can't just call a repair person when you're 40 million miles from Earth. Exactly. That's why I'm learning about engineering too, and biology, and chemistry, pretty much everything. Sophie took a huge bite of her sandwich. Dad says I can be anything I want if I work hard enough. Your dad is right. Victoria glanced at Daniel, something soft in her expression. And he's very proud of you. He talks about you all the time. Sophie turned to Daniel with surprise. You do? Of course I do. You're the most interesting person I know. Even more interesting than your work friends? Especially more interesting than my work friends. Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer and returned to her sandwich. But Daniel noticed her watching Victoria with new curiosity, that sharp mind clearly working through calculations he couldn't quite follow. The planetarium show was everything Sophie had hoped for, a stunning visual journey through the solar system and beyond. She sat between Daniel and Victoria, occasionally grabbing both their hands during particularly exciting moments. Daniel felt Victoria's fingers tighten around Sophie's, and his heart swelled with something that felt dangerously close to complete happiness. Afterward, as they stood outside the museum in the late afternoon sun, Sophie looked up at Victoria seriously. Can we do this again sometime? She asked. I have a telescope at Dad's apartment. I could show you how to find Jupiter. Victoria's eyes went bright with what might have been tears, but she smiled. I would love that. Good. Next Wednesday? Dad has me on Wednesdays. Sophie, Daniel started, but Victoria cut him off. Next Wednesday sounds perfect. They said goodbye on the museum steps, and Daniel watched Victoria walk away, her shoulders a little straighter, her step a little lighter despite the exhaustion he knew she must be feeling. I like her, Sophie announced as they walked to the car. She's nice, and she actually cares about space stuff, not just pretending because she thinks kids are cute. I'm glad you like her, sweetheart. Are you dating her? Daniel nearly tripped over his own feet. What? Are you dating Victoria? Sophie repeated patiently, like she was explaining something obvious. You look at her the way you used to look at Mom before everything got bad, and she looks at you the same way. Plus, you held hands when you thought I wasn't watching during the Mars section. Daniel had no idea what to say. He'd planned to ease into this conversation gradually, but Sophie had apparently decided to skip ahead. Would it bother you if I was? He asked carefully. Sophie considered this seriously. Is she nice to you? Very nice. Does she make you happy? Yes. Very happy? Then it doesn't bother me. You should be happy, Dad. You've been sad for a long time. She swung his hand as they walked. Plus, she promised to learn about exoplanets, and anyone willing to do that is okay in my book. Daniel laughed, relief flooding through him. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just don't usually ask me about important stuff. Well, I'm asking now. You really don't mind if Victoria and I spend time together? Nope. But Dad? Sophie stopped walking and looked up at him seriously. Don't mess it up, okay? She's cool, and I want her to keep coming to museums with us. I'll do my best, sweetheart. That's all anyone can do, Sophie said matter-of-factly, then skipped ahead to the car. Daniel stood there for a moment, marveling at his daughter's capacity for understanding, before following her. That night, after Sophie was asleep, he called Victoria. How did I do? She asked immediately, anxiety clear in her voice. Was I okay? I've never spent time with children before, and I kept worrying I was saying the wrong things. You were perfect, Daniel interrupted. She loved you. She wants you to come to my apartment next Wednesday to look at stars through her telescope. Really? Victoria sounded stunned. She wants to see me again? She does. And Victoria? He paused, smiling. She knows we're dating. She figured it out on her own. Said we look at each other in a way that gives it away. Silence on the other end, then. And she's okay with it? She told me not to mess it up because you're cool and she wants you to keep coming to museums with us. Victoria laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. I think I just got approval from the most important person in your life. Second most important, Daniel corrected gently. You're tied for first now. He heard her breath catch. Daniel. I love you, Victoria. I've been trying not to say it because it's too soon and too complicated and probably too much. But watching you with Sophie today, seeing how much effort you put into making her comfortable, how genuinely interested you were in everything she said, I love you. And I needed you to know. The silence stretched so long Daniel started to worry he'd made a terrible mistake. Then Victoria spoke, her voice thick with emotion. I love you too. I've loved you for weeks, maybe longer. I just didn't think I was allowed to have this. Didn't think I deserved it after all the choices I'd made. You deserve everything good, Victoria. Everything. Come over, she said suddenly. Please, I need to see you. Daniel looked at his closed bedroom door, thinking about Sophie asleep down the hall. I can't tonight. Sophie's here. Then tomorrow, as soon as you can, She paused. I need to tell you something, and I need to do it in person. Something in her tone made Daniel's stomach drop. What is it? Are you okay? Did something happen with your treatment? I'm fine. It's not that. Just come tomorrow, please. Okay, I'll be there by 10. Thank you. And Daniel, I love you. I love you too. He hung up but couldn't shake the uneasy feeling settling in his chest. Victoria had sounded different, not scared exactly, but serious in a way that worried him. The next morning, he dropped Sophie off at his parents' house, endured his mother's knowing looks and questions about his new friend, and drove to Victoria's apartment with growing anxiety. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, no makeup, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and terrified. Come in, she said, stepping aside. The apartment felt different somehow, lived in, less like a hotel. There were books scattered on the coffee table now, one of Sophie's drawings taped to the refrigerator, Daniel's favorite coffee in the cupboard. Small signs that Victoria was letting someone into her carefully controlled life. What's going on? Daniel asked once they were seated on the couch. You're scaring me. Victoria took his hands, holding them tightly. I got a call from the hospital yesterday, after we left the museum. They want to move me to a different treatment protocol. Why? I thought this one was working. It is. That's the problem. It's working too well, too fast, and they're worried about long-term side effects. She took a shaky breath. The new protocol is more aggressive. Stronger medications, more frequent treatments, 3 times a week instead of 2 for the next 4 months. Daniel felt like he'd been punched. 4 months? The doctors think it gives me the best chance at full remission. But Daniel, it's going to be harder. More side effects, more exhaustion, more... She broke off, her voice cracking. I won't be able to work as much. I'll probably have to take medical leave, and I won't be able to hide this anymore. Everyone will know. Okay, Daniel said, his mind racing. Okay, we'll figure it out. There's more. Victoria wouldn't meet his eyes. The board is already concerned about my performance. Margaret Foster pulled me aside last week, asked if everything was all right. If I take medical leave now, they might push for my resignation, or force me into early retirement. Everything I've built could fall apart. Then let it, Daniel said firmly. Victoria's head snapped up. What? Let it fall apart. Victoria, you're fighting for your life. Nothing else matters more than that. Not the job, not the board, not the corner office. You don't understand. My career is... She struggled for words. It's who I am. It's all I have. That's not true anymore. He cupped her face gently. You have me. You have Sophie. You have a life outside those office walls, and it's time to start choosing it. I can't just walk away from 20 years of work. I'm not asking you to walk away forever. I'm asking you to prioritize staying alive. His voice was intense now, urgent. What good is the corner office if you're not here to sit in it? Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared. I'm so scared, Daniel. What if I do this? Take the leave, step back, let everything go, and I still don't make it? What if I sacrifice everything and it's not enough? Then at least you spent your time on things that mattered, on treatment that could save you, on relationships that made you happy. He pulled her close. But you're going to make it. You're going to beat this. And when you do, you can decide what kind of life you want on the other side. She cried against his shoulder, months of fear and uncertainty finally breaking through her controlled exterior. Daniel held her, letting her fall apart, knowing she needed this release. I'll be with you every step, he promised. Every treatment, every appointment, every hard day. You won't do this alone. What about your job? You can't keep taking mornings off 3 times a week. Then I'll figure something out. Talk to HR about flexible hours. Use my personal time, whatever it takes. Daniel, you could lose the Donovan account. You could lose your promotion prospects. I don't care. And he realized he meant it. I don't care about any of that if it means losing you. Victoria pulled back to look at him, her face blotchy and tear-stained. How can you be so sure about this? About us? We've only been together a few months. Because some things you just know, and I know you're worth fighting for. He brushed tears from her cheeks. So we fight, together, and we deal with whatever comes. She kissed him then, desperate and grateful and full of love. When they broke apart, she was still crying, but smiling too. I have to tell the board this week, she said, about the medical leave. They'll want to appoint an interim CEO. Do you have someone you trust? Marcus Foster, Margaret's son. He's been VP of operations for 3 years, knows the company inside and out. She laughed bitterly. He's probably been waiting for me to fail so he could take over. Hey, Daniel made her look at him. You're not failing. You're surviving. There's a difference. Tell that to the board. I will if I have to. Victoria smiled despite herself. My hero. Someone has to be. They spent the rest of the day together, talking through logistics and fears and all the practical details that came with Victoria's decision. Daniel called his parents, explained that he'd need more help with Sophie over the next few months. His mother asked pointed questions about why, and Daniel found himself telling her about Victoria, about the relationship, the cancer, all of it. Bring her to dinner, his mother said immediately. This week, I want to meet the woman who's making my son happy again. Mom, she's sick. She might not feel up to... Then we'll make it easy. Nothing fancy. Just family. His mother's voice softened. Daniel, if this woman matters to you, she matters to us. Let us help. So that Wednesday, Daniel brought Victoria to his parents' house for dinner. Sophie was delighted. His mother was warm and welcoming. His father grilled steaks and asked Victoria intelligent questions about finance that had nothing to do with her illness. For a few hours, they were just normal people having a normal family dinner. Daniel watched Victoria laugh at his father's terrible jokes, saw her relax into conversation with his mother about gardening of all things, noticed how Sophie sat close to her during dessert. This was what a real life looked like. This was what he'd been missing without knowing it. Later, as they drove back to Victoria's apartment, she was quiet. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked. "That I've wasted so much time," she said softly. "All those years building a career and I never had anything like tonight. Just normal people being kind to each other. Your parents didn't care about my job title or my salary. They cared about me because I matter to you." "You do matter to me. More than anything." "I know, and that's terrifying and wonderful," and she turned to him. "I went to the board this afternoon, before dinner, told them about the medical leave." Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "What did they say?" "Exactly what I expected. Concern for my health, of course, but also questions about succession planning and leadership continuity. Marcus Foster will be interim CEO effective next Monday." She laughed, but it sounded hollow. 20 years, and they replaced me in one meeting." "They didn't replace you. It's temporary." "Is it?" "Daniel, be realistic. I'm going to be out for months, maybe longer. By the time I'm ready to come back, Marcus will have settled in, the board will have gotten used to him, and I'll be—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "I'll be the sick woman who used to run things." Daniel pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face her. "Listen to me. You are Victoria Hale. You built that company from a mid-level analyst to a multi-billion-dollar firm. You are brilliant and fierce, and you don't give up. This isn't over." "Feels like it is." "Then we change the story. We focus on what matters, getting you healthy. And when you're ready, we figure out what comes next. Maybe it's going back to the firm. Maybe it's something completely different. But we don't decide that now when you're exhausted and scared." Victoria closed her eyes. "I'm so tired, Daniel. Tired of fighting. Tired of being strong. Tired of pretending I have everything under control." "Then stop pretending. Let me be strong for both of us for a while." She leaned into him, and they sat there in the parked car while traffic rushed past, holding on to each other in the growing darkness. The new treatment protocol started the following week, and it was brutal. Victoria emerged from each session looking worse than before, pale, shaking, barely able to stand. Daniel rearranged his entire schedule, working early mornings and late evenings so he could drive her to appointments 3 times a week. The Donovan account suffered. He missed deadlines. His performance reviews started slipping. Marcus Chen noticed first. "Man, are you okay? You seem really distracted lately." "Just dealing with some personal stuff," Daniel said, which was true if massively understated. "Is it the divorce? I know that can mess with your head. It's not the divorce." Marcus studied him carefully. "You know you can talk to me, right? If something's going on?" But Daniel couldn't talk to Marcus, couldn't explain that he was watching the woman he loved fight for her life while trying to maintain some semblance of professional normalcy. So he just nodded and returned to his work, letting people assume whatever they wanted. Sophie noticed too. "Dad, you look tired." "I'm fine, sweetheart." "You're not fine. You're worried about Victoria." She climbed into his lap, something she rarely did anymore at 8 years old. "Is she going to be okay?" Daniel held her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "I hope so, baby. I really hope so." "Me too. I like her. She's teaching me about financial planning for my Mars mission." Despite everything, Daniel smiled. "Is she now?" "Yep, she says if I'm going to colonize a planet, I need to understand investment strategies and resource allocation. So we're working on a budget together." Of course they were, because Victoria couldn't help being brilliant even while fighting cancer. "That sounds very responsible." "It is. Victoria says responsibility is just another word for caring about your future." Sophie looked up at him seriously. "Dad, are you going to marry her?" Daniel's heart stuttered. "That's a pretty big question, Sophie." "It's not that big. You love her, she loves you. That's usually how it works, right?" "It's a little more complicated than that." "Why? Because she's sick?" Sophie's expression was matter of fact. People don't stop loving each other just because one of them is sick. That would be mean. Out of the mouths of babes, Daniel thought. You're right. It would be mean. So are you going to marry her or not? I don't know yet, sweetheart. We're taking things one day at a time right now. Well, when you do decide, I think you should get a ring with a star sapphire. Victoria would like that because of the space connection. Daniel hugged her tighter, marveling at her certainty. How did you get so smart? Good genetics, Sophie said seriously, plus lots of reading. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Daniel sat in his dark living room thinking about marriage and commitment and all the ways love could be terrifying and necessary at the same time. He thought about Victoria in her empty apartment, fighting through another night of post-treatment nausea. He thought about Sophie's simple clarity. People don't stop loving each other just because one of them is sick. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Can't sleep, missing you. V, want company? I can ask my parents to stay with Sophie. It's midnight. Don't wake everyone up. They won't mind. Let me come over. There was a long pause, then, please, I don't want to be alone tonight. Daniel called his mother, who arrived 20 minutes later in her bathrobe, gave him a knowing look, and told him to take as long as he needed. He drove through the empty city streets to Victoria's building, let himself in with the key she'd given him 3 weeks ago, and found her curled up on the bathroom floor, exhausted from being sick. Hey, he said softly, kneeling beside her. Rough night? The worst. Her voice was hoarse. This new protocol is killing me. It's saving you. There's a difference. Doesn't feel like it. He helped her up, got her settled on the couch with blankets and water, sat beside her while she rested her head on his shoulder. I can't do this for 4 more months, she whispered. I can't, Daniel. You can. You're the strongest person I know. I'm not strong. I'm falling apart. Then fall apart. I've got you. And he did. He held her while she cried, while she raged against the unfairness of it all, while she finally exhausted herself into sleep. He stayed awake watching her breathe, counting each breath like a prayer, thinking about Sophie's question and his own answer. One day at a time. But some days, one day at a time meant showing up and refusing to leave. It meant choosing to stay even when everything was hard. It meant loving someone enough to hold them while they fell apart and trusting they'd do the same for you when your turn came. And Daniel realized, sitting there in the pre-dawn darkness with Victoria sleeping against his chest, that he'd already made his choice. He'd made it months ago when he first drove her to treatment. He'd made it when he told her he loved her. He'd made it every morning when he showed up knowing how hard the day would be. He was all in, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. Maybe Sophie was right. Maybe it really was that simple after all. The rumors started 3 weeks later. Daniel heard them in the break room first, whispered conversations that stopped when he walked in, sidelong glances from colleagues who'd always been friendly before. He ignored it at first, focused on managing what remained of the Donovan account and getting Victoria to treatment sessions that seemed to drain more life from her each time. Then Marcus Chen pulled him aside after a staff meeting. People are talking, Marcus said quietly, glancing around to make sure they were alone. About you and Hale. Daniel's stomach dropped. What are they saying? That you're the reason she took medical leave, that you two have been... Marcus paused delicately. Involved. That she gave you the Donovan account because of a personal relationship, not merit. That's not true. She gave me that account before... Daniel stopped, realizing he was about to confirm exactly what Marcus was implying. Before what? Marcus asked gently. Daniel, I'm not judging you. But if there's something going on, you need to be careful. The board is already looking for reasons to restructure the senior analyst positions. If they think there was favoritism, there wasn't. I earned that account. I know you did, but perception matters more than reality sometimes. Marcus looked genuinely concerned. Just watch your back, okay? Margaret Foster's been asking questions about your recent performance issues. She's not happy about missed deadlines. After Marcus left, Daniel sat at his desk staring at nothing, his mind racing. He'd been so focused on Victoria's health that he hadn't considered how their relationship might look to people who didn't know the full story. A CEO, dating an employee she'd personally promoted was exactly the kind of scandal boards love to exploit. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. How was work? V. He stared at the message, debating whether to tell her about the rumors. She had enough to deal with without worrying about office politics. But they'd promised each other honesty, complete transparency no matter how difficult. We need to talk. Can I come over tonight? That sounds ominous. What happened? Nothing bad. Just need to discuss some things. After Sophie goes to bed, I'll be waiting. That evening, Daniel tucked Sophie in, read her 3 chapters of her current space exploration book, and listened to her excited theories about terraforming Mars. The normalcy of the routine felt like a lifeline when everything else seemed to be spiraling. "Dad?" Sophie said as he was turning off her light. "Is Victoria okay?" She seemed really tired when she came over on Wednesday. "She's fighting really hard, sweetheart. Some days are harder than others. Can I make her a card to cheer her up?" Daniel's heart swelled. She would love that. "Good. I'll make one tomorrow with stars on it. Stars always make people feel better." He kissed her forehead and headed to Victoria's apartment, the weight of the coming conversation sitting heavy in his chest. Victoria answered the door looking exhausted but determined. She'd clearly had treatment that morning. Her skin had that grayish pallor it always got after the new medications, but she'd changed into soft clothes and pulled her hair back, trying to look more alert than she probably felt. "Tell me," she said as soon as he was inside. So he did. He told her about the rumors, about Marcus's warning, about Margaret Foster's questions. He watched her face grow tighter with each detail, saw the flash of anger in her eyes that reminded him of the formidable CEO she'd been before cancer forced her to step back. "I should have seen this coming," Victoria said when he finished. She paced her living room like a caged animal, her exhaustion temporarily forgotten in the face of her fury. "Of course they'd turn our relationship into a weapon. Of course they'd use it to undermine everything you've accomplished. Victoria, it's okay. It's not okay. You earned the Donovan account on merit. You've managed it brilliantly. Your performance issues are because you've been taking care of me, not because of any lack of ability." She stopped pacing and looked at him. "We need to get ahead of this. Make a statement before they control the narrative." "What kind of statement?" "The truth. We tell them we're in a relationship, that it started after I assigned you the account, that there was no favoritism involved, that my medical leave was my decision based on my health needs." Daniel moved to her, taking her hands. "That's your private business. You don't owe them an explanation about your personal life." "I do if it's affecting your career." Her voice cracked slightly. "Daniel, I won't be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. I won't be that person who destroys someone else's future because I was selfish enough to want something for myself." "You're not destroying anything, and wanting to be loved isn't selfish." "It is when it costs you this much." Daniel cupped her face, making her look at him. "Listen to me. You are worth every complication, every whispered rumor, every concerned warning from well-meaning colleagues. You're worth it, Victoria. And I'm not walking away because things got difficult. What if they fire you? Then I find another job. The world doesn't end. You have Sophie to support. You can't just..." "I can and I will." His voice was firm. "Because some things matter more than job security, and you matter more than anything." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "How can you be so calm about this?" "Because I've already lost one relationship by not fighting hard enough for it. I'm not making that mistake twice." He kissed her forehead gently. "We face this together. If you want to make a statement to the board, we make it together. If you want to keep it private, we keep it private. But whatever we do it as a team." She leaned into him, and he felt her trembling, whether from exhaustion, emotion, or the medication, he couldn't tell. Probably all 3. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm scared of losing you. Scared of you realizing this is too hard and too complicated and too much mess to deal with. Not possible. You're stuck with me, even if I drag you down with me. Especially then. That's kind of the point of love, Victoria. You don't bail when things get hard. You dig in and refuse to let go." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other in her quiet apartment while the city lights flickered outside. Eventually, Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Okay. Tomorrow, I'll draft a letter to the board. Professional but clear. I'll copy you on it before I send it." "Are you sure? We don't have to do this right away." "Yes, we do. Because rumors fester, and I won't let them destroy what you've built." She managed a tired smile. Besides, I'm too exhausted to be subtle about things anymore. Might as well be honest. The letter went out the next afternoon. Victoria kept it concise and professional, acknowledged her relationship with Daniel, clarified the timeline, emphasized that all professional decisions had been made on merit, and stated clearly that her medical leave was unrelated to their personal involvement. She copied the entire executive board and HR. Daniel held his breath waiting for the fallout. It came in the form of a meeting request from Margaret Foster 2 days later. He sat across from her in her office, trying to read her expression and failing. Margaret had been with the firm for 15 years, worked her way up through sheer competence, and had a reputation for being fair but unforgiving of ethical lapses. "Mr. Carter," she began, "I've read Miss Hale's letter. I appreciate the transparency." "Thank you. However, transparency doesn't eliminate the optics issue. You understand that this relationship creates complications for the firm." "I do." "Good." Margaret steepled her fingers, studying him. "So here's what's going to happen. We're going to conduct an internal review of the Donovan account assignment. Not because I doubt your merit, your work has been excellent, but because we need to demonstrate to our stakeholders that our processes are sound." Daniel's chest tightened. "I understand. The review will take approximately 2 weeks. During that time, you'll continue managing the account as usual. If the review concludes that proper procedures were followed, which I expect it will, we'll issue a statement confirming as much. Your position remains secure. And if the review concludes otherwise?" Margaret's expression softened slightly. "Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But Carter, between you and me, I've seen your work. I know you earned this. The review is theater to satisfy people who need to feel like we're being thorough. It's annoying, but it's necessary." Relief flooded through him. "Thank you, Ms. Foster." "Don't thank me yet. There's a condition." She leaned forward. "Your relationship with Victoria cannot impact your work going forward. No preferential treatment if she returns to her position, no appearance of conflicts of interest, no letting personal issues affect professional judgment. Can you commit to that?" "Absolutely." "Good. Because I like you, Carter. You're talented, hardworking, and you handled an impossible client better than anyone expected. I'd hate to lose you over something that could be managed with clear boundaries." Daniel left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic. It wasn't ideal, but it was manageable. He could handle a review. He could maintain professional boundaries. He could do this. He texted Victoria the update, and she called immediately. "That's better than I expected," she said, though she sounded exhausted. "Margaret's being fair. Are you okay? You sound terrible." "Treatment was rough this morning. I'm just tired." A pause. "Can you come over tonight? I know you have Sophie, but my parents have her tonight. I'm already on my way." He found Victoria on her couch, wrapped in blankets despite the apartment being warm, her face pale and drawn. She'd been sick again. He could tell by the way she held herself, the careful stillness of someone whose body had betrayed them. "Bad day?" he asked gently, settling beside her. "The worst. The oncologist said my white blood cell count is too low. They might have to delay next week's treatment to let my body recover." She closed her eyes. "Which sounds like good news, a break from feeling like death. But all I can think is that delays mean more time with cancer still in my body. More time for it to come back stronger." Daniel pulled her close, letting her rest against him. "What did the doctor actually say?" "That my body's responding well to treatment, but needs time to rebuild its defenses. That a week delay won't impact the overall prognosis. That I'm on track for scans in 6 weeks to see if we've achieved remission." She laughed bitterly. "So logically I know it's fine, but logic and fear don't always agree." "Fear is allowed. You're fighting for your life. Of course you're scared." They sat in silence for a while, Victoria's breathing gradually evening out as exhaustion pulled her towards sleep. Daniel held her, thinking about the review, about Margaret's warning, about all the ways their life together required constant navigation of complicated waters. His phone buzzed with a text from Sophie, forwarded through his mother. "Tell Victoria I finished her card. It has the Big Dipper and Orion on it. Hope she feels better soon. Love, Sophie." Attached was a photo of the card, construction paper covered in carefully drawn constellations, with "Get well soon" written in Sophie's neat handwriting across the top. Daniel showed it to Victoria, who smiled despite her exhaustion. "She's wonderful," Victoria murmured. "You made a wonderful human. We got lucky." "No, you were a good father. There's a difference." She shifted slightly to look at him. "Do you want more children? After everything with Jennifer, did you want more?" The question surprised him. "I never really thought about it." Sophie was enough. "Why?" "Because I can't give you that. The cancer treatment, even if it works, even if I survive, it's likely made me infertile. The doctors mentioned it early on, but I didn't care then because I'd already made peace with not having children." Her voice was small. "But now I'm with you, and Sophie is so perfect, and I wonder if you'll regret choosing someone who can't give you more of that." Daniel's heart broke. "Victoria, look at me." She did, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I don't need more children. I have Sophie, and she's everything I could have hoped for. And now I have you, which is more than I ever expected to find again." He touched her face gently. "You're enough. Just you, exactly as you are. That's enough." "Oh, even broken and sick and possibly infertile? You're not broken. You're fighting. And yes, even sick and possibly infertile and complicated and fierce and brilliant." He kissed her softly. "I love all of you, Victoria. Not some idealized version, you." She cried then, quiet tears that spoke of relief and fear and a lifetime of believing she had to be perfect to be worthy of love. Daniel held her while she cried, offering no platitudes, just presence. "I want to marry you," he said suddenly, the words spilling out before he could second-guess them. "I know it's too soon and too complicated and probably terrible timing, but I want you to know that this isn't temporary for me. This isn't just helping you through a crisis. I want forever with you." Victoria pulled back to stare at him. "Daniel, I'm not proposing right now. I know you need to focus on treatment, and we have the work situation to navigate, and there's still so much uncertainty ahead." He took her hands. "But I needed you to know that I'm thinking about forever, that I see a future with you on the other side of all this." "What if there isn't another side?" she whispered. "What if the treatment doesn't work? What if—" "Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But I refuse to plan my life around worst-case scenarios." He squeezed her hands. "I'm choosing to believe you're going to beat this, and when you do, I want to spend the rest of my life with you." That's the most romantic and terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me. Good. You should be terrified. I'm a package deal with an 8-year-old space enthusiast who will probably want to talk to you about orbital mechanics at breakfast. Victoria laughed through her tears. "I love talking to Sophie about orbital mechanics." Then it settled. "We're getting married eventually, and you're going to have to learn to like terrible pancakes because that's my signature breakfast dish." "Your pancakes are awful," Victoria agreed, smiling now. "They're always burned on one side." "That's the Daniel Carter special. Burned on one side, raw in the middle, but made with love." "I can't believe I'm considering spending my life with someone who can't make pancakes." "Too late. You already love me." "I really do." She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "And yes," Daniel's heart stopped. "Yes, what?" "Yes, I'll marry you. Eventually. When the timing makes sense and we've navigated all the complications and I'm healthy enough to actually enjoy planning a wedding." She smiled at his stunned expression. "You said you weren't proposing right now, but I'm answering anyway, so you can't take it back later." "I would never take it back." He pulled her close, his heart feeling too big for his chest. "You just said yes to the worst proposal in history." It was perfect. Completely unplanned and honest and very you. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Sophie's going to want input on the wedding, you know. Probably insist on a space theme." "Absolutely. We'll get married under the stars, have a telescope instead of a unity candle." "Please tell me you're joking." "Only partly. I'm definitely letting Sophie plan at least some of it." Victoria laughed, and Daniel held her, thinking about how his life had transformed in less than a year. From divorce papers on his kitchen counter to engagement plans with a woman who'd become his entire world. It was messy and complicated and absolutely nothing like the safe, careful life he'd imagined for himself. It was also perfect. The internal review concluded 2 weeks later exactly as Margaret Foster had predicted. No favoritism found, proper procedures followed, Daniel's merit clearly documented. The firm issued a brief statement confirming as much, and the whispers gradually died down as people moved on to other gossip. But the real victory came 6 weeks after that, when Victoria called Daniel from the oncology center, her voice shaking with emotion. The scans came back clean, she said, and he could hear her crying. No evidence of disease, complete remission, Daniel. It worked. He was in the middle of a meeting with Richard Donovan, but he didn't care. He stood up, ignoring Donovan's surprised expression, and whooped loud enough that everyone in the office turned to stare. That's incredible. Victoria, when can you come home? I'm leaving now. Can you meet me? I'm on my way. He hung up and turned to find Marcus Chen staring at him with wide eyes. Good news? Marcus asked carefully. The best news. Daniel was already grabbing his jacket. Marcus, can you take over this call? Something important just came up. Sure, but Daniel was already gone, half running to the elevator, texting his parents to pick up Sophie early, calling Victoria back just to hear her voice again. He drove to her apartment, breaking probably a dozen traffic laws, parked illegally, and took the stairs because waiting for the elevator felt impossible. Victoria opened the door before he could knock, and he swept her into his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. Clean scans, she kept repeating. Clean scans, Daniel. I'm going to live. You're going to live, he echoed, setting her down and kissing her like she was air and he'd been drowning. You're going to live, and we're going to get married, and Sophie's going to plan a ridiculous space-themed wedding, and we're going to have a whole life together. A whole life, Victoria agreed, smiling through tears. I can't believe I get to have that. They held each other in her doorway, laughing and crying and making promises about a future that had felt uncertain just hours ago, but now stretched out before them full of possibility. That evening, Daniel brought Sophie to Victoria's apartment to share the news. Sophie listened seriously as Victoria explained about the clean scans, about remission, about still needing maintenance treatment but being declared cancer-free for now. Then Sophie launched herself at Victoria, hugging her with the fierce intensity of a child who understood more than adults gave her credit for. I knew you'd beat it, Sophie said confidently. You're too stubborn to let cancer win. Sophie, Daniel started, but Victoria was laughing. She's right. I am too stubborn. Victoria hugged Sophie back. Thank you for believing in me, kiddo. That's what family does, like Sophie said, matter-of-factly. Then she pulled back and looked at both of them seriously. So, now can we talk about the wedding? Because I have ideas. Daniel and Victoria exchanged glances, both trying not to laugh. What kind of ideas? Victoria asked. Sophie pulled out her tablet, which was apparently loaded with sketches and notes. Okay, so obviously we need a space theme, but not tacky space, like elegant space. I was thinking we could do the ceremony at a planetarium or outside under the stars if the weather's good. And instead of a unity candle, you could launch a small rocket together. Sophie, Daniel interrupted gently, we haven't actually planned anything yet. I know. That's why I'm helping. You're both really busy, and weddings take forever to plan, so I got started. She looked at them hopefully. Is that okay? Victoria's eyes were bright again, but this time with joy instead of tears. That's more than okay. That's wonderful. Can I see your ideas? Sophie beamed and settled between them on the couch, launching into detailed explanations of her vision. Daniel watched them, his daughter and the woman he loved, heads bent together over wedding sketches, already acting like the family they were about to become, and felt something settle in his chest. This was it. This was what he'd been missing without knowing it. Not perfection, but belonging. Not a life without complications, but a life where the complications were worth it because of who he was navigating them with. Later, after Sophie had fallen asleep on Victoria's couch, Daniel carried her to the guest bedroom Victoria had started keeping ready for exactly these occasions. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and returned to find Victoria standing at her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. "What are you thinking?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "That a year ago, I was standing in this exact spot thinking my life was over. That I'd made all the wrong choices, built all the wrong things, and it was too late to change any of it." She leaned back into him. "And now I have you and Sophie and a future I actually want to live to see. It's almost too much to process." "Well, you have time to process now, lots of time." "A whole life," she repeated, turning to face him. "Daniel Carter, You saved my life. No, you saved it. You fought for it every single day. I just drove you to the appointments. But you did so much more than that. She touched his face gently. You gave me a reason to fight, showed me what I'd be missing if I gave up, loved me when I was at my worst and didn't ask for anything in return except the chance to keep showing up. That's what love is supposed to be, Victoria. Showing up. Especially when it's hard. I know that now. Thanks to you. She kissed him softly. So thank you. For everything. For seeing me when I was invisible. For staying when anyone else would have left. For building a life with me when I thought it was too late for that. Daniel held her close, looking out at the city that had witnessed their entire journey, from that first quiet drive to treatment, through months of fear and uncertainty, to this moment of hope and possibility. It's never too late, he said firmly. That's what you taught me. It's never too late to choose differently, to love better, to build the life you actually want instead of settling for the one that feels safe. So what life do we want? Victoria asked. Daniel thought about it seriously. One where we get married under the stars with a space theme because our daughter insists on it, where you decide what you want to do with your career now that you have the freedom to choose, where we make terrible pancakes on Sunday mornings and argue about whose turn it is to take out the trash, where we're honest and messy and real with each other, where we choose each other every single day, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. Victoria smiled, that genuine, unguarded smile that still made his heart race. That sounds perfect. Good, because that's what you're getting. They stood together at the window, holding each other while the city glittered below and Sophie slept peacefully down the hall, and for the first time in longer than either could remember, the future felt bright instead of frightening, full of promise instead of uncertainty, worth fighting for instead of something to simply survive. And somewhere in the quiet of that moment, between heartbeats and breaths and the soft sound of Sophie's breathing from the other room, Daniel Carter and Victoria Hale stopped being two broken people trying to survive their separate storms and became something stronger. A family built not on perfection but on choice, not on certainty but on courage, not on the absence of pain but on the refusal to let pain have the final word. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. 3 months after Victoria's remission announcement, she made a decision that surprised everyone except Daniel. She didn't return to Wellington and Cross. The board had expected her back, had kept the interim CEO arrangement in place specifically to accommodate her recovery. Marcus Foster had done well in her absence, but everyone understood he was keeping the seat warm. Victoria Hale was supposed to reclaim her empire, stronger than ever, cancer defeated. Instead, she walked into the boardroom on a Tuesday morning and resigned. I'm grateful for the opportunity you've given me over the years, she told the stunned executives. But my priorities have shifted. I want to spend my time differently now. Margaret Foster recovered first. Victoria, if this is about the medical leave, we can arrange flexible hours, part-time consulting, whatever you need. It's not about accommodation, it's about choice. Victoria's voice was calm, certain. I spent 20 years building a career that nearly cost me everything that actually matters. I don't want to spend the next 20 making the same mistake. What will you do? Someone asked. Victoria smiled. Live. Actually live instead of just surviving. The news rippled through the office within hours. Daniel heard the whispers, fielded the questions, and simply told people Victoria was pursuing other opportunities. He didn't mention that those opportunities included teaching a financial literacy course at the community college, consulting for small businesses that couldn't afford big firms, and spending Wednesday evenings helping Sophie with her Mars colonization budget spreadsheets. Richard Donovan called Daniel directly when he heard. Hale's really leaving? Donovan's gravelly voice held genuine surprise. Thought that woman would die at her desk. She chose differently, sir. Huh, good for her. Life's too short to waste on things that don't matter. A pause. You planning to stick around, Carter? Because if you're leaving too, I want advance notice. You're the only analyst who's ever actually understood what I need. I'm staying, Mr. Donovan. No plans to leave. Good. Because I just recommended you for senior analyst to Foster. You earned it. The promotion came through 2 weeks later, senior analyst with a corner office on the 34th floor and a salary that made Daniel's divorce-era budget look laughable. It wasn't the 36th floor, wasn't Victoria's old empire, but it was his, earned through merit, confirmed by review, untainted by rumors or doubt. "I'm proud of you," Victoria said when he showed her the offer letter. They were in her apartment, which had gradually transformed from a sterile showplace into an actual home. Sophie's drawings on the refrigerator, Daniel's books on the shelves, photographs of the three of them scattered throughout. "I learned from the best," Daniel said. "You learn by being yourself. That's harder than it sounds." She kissed him softly. "So when do you want to get married? Before or after Sophie launches her model rocket at the community science fair?" "After. Definitely after. I don't want to compete with rocket launches for attention." They'd set a date for late September, early enough to still hold the ceremony outdoors, late enough to give Victoria's body time to fully recover from treatment. Sophie had taken over most of the planning with the fierce dedication she applied to everything, presenting them with detailed proposals and budget breakdowns that would have impressed corporate executives. "She's terrifying," Victoria said fondly, reviewing Sophie's latest wedding timeline. "She has backup plans for the backup plans." "Wonder where she gets that from," Daniel teased. "I have no idea what you're implying." The actual proposal, the official one, happened on a random Thursday evening in June. Daniel had planned something elaborate, had reserved a table at an expensive restaurant, had the ring in his pocket for a week waiting for the perfect moment. But perfect moments, he'd learned, were overrated. Real moments were better. They were making dinner together in Victoria's kitchen. Well, Daniel was making dinner while Victoria provided commentary and occasionally stirred things, when Sophie ran in from the living room where she'd been working on homework. "Dad, Victoria, you have to see this!" She was pulling up something on her tablet, practically vibrating with excitement. "NASA just announced they're accepting applications for the Artemis program candidates. I'm too young now, but in 10 years I could apply. And..." She stopped mid-sentence, staring at something behind them. Daniel turned to find Victoria frozen in place, wooden spoon in hand, staring at the ring he'd apparently dropped on the counter while chopping vegetables. So much for perfect timing. "Is that..." Sophie's eyes were huge. "Are you..." "Yes," Daniel said, because there was no point in denying it now. He picked up the ring, a platinum band with a star sapphire, exactly as Sophie had suggested months ago, and turned to Victoria, who still hadn't moved. "This was supposed to be more romantic," he admitted. "Had a whole plan. Restaurant reservation, carefully rehearsed speech." He smiled. "But this is more us, isn't it? Chaotic and imperfect and interrupted by space program announcements." Victoria set down the wooden spoon with shaking hands. "Victoria Hale," Daniel continued, dropping to one knee right there in the kitchen while Sophie watched with barely contained glee. "Will you marry me? Officially this time, with a ring and a proposal and our daughter as witness?" "Our daughter," Victoria repeated softly, her eyes filling with tears as she looked at Sophie. "Well, yeah," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "I mean, you're marrying Dad, so that makes you my stepmom. That's how it works." Victoria covered her mouth with her hand, crying now, and Daniel started to worry he'd miscalculated everything. But then she was nodding, pulling him up, kissing him, while Sophie cheered in the background. "Yes," Victoria managed between kisses. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger, and Sophie immediately demanded to examine it. "Perfect choice, Dad. The star sapphire was exactly right." She looked up at Victoria seriously. "You know what this means, right?" "What?" Victoria asked, still crying happy tears. "You're stuck with us now. No takebacks." Victoria laughed and pulled Sophie into a hug. "Wouldn't dream of it." They ended up ordering pizza because dinner was completely forgotten in the chaos of celebration. Sophie called Daniel's parents, who were thrilled. Victoria called her own mother, a conversation Daniel only heard one side of, but which ended with Victoria saying, "Yes, Mom, I'm happy. Really, truly happy." That night, after Sophie finally fell asleep still clutching her tablet with NASA applications bookmarked, Daniel and Victoria sat on her balcony under the summer stars. "Your mother seemed surprised," Daniel said carefully. Victoria rarely talked about her family, and he didn't want to push. "She spent my whole life thinking I'd die alone in a corner office." Victoria twisted the ring on her finger, watching it catch the light. Turns out she was half right. "I almost did. Just got lucky at the last possible minute." "That wasn't luck. That was you being brave enough to ask for help. That was me being desperate enough to stop pretending I was fine." She leaned into him. "Best decision I ever made." Second best, Daniel corrected. Best was saying yes tonight. Tonight was a given. I already said yes months ago, remember? Still counts as a decision. They sat in comfortable silence, and Daniel thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first quiet drive to the oncology center, through months of fear and treatment and uncertainty, to this moment of peace and promise. I want to adopt her, Victoria said suddenly. Sophie, if that's okay with you, and with her, I want to make it official. Daniel's throat tightened. Are you sure? That's a big step. I'm sure. She already called me her stepmom tonight, and it felt... Victoria paused, searching for words. Right. It felt right. Like something I didn't know I was missing until I found it. And I want her to know that I'm choosing her too. Not just you. Both of you. We should ask her, Daniel said. Make sure that's what she wants. She's going to say yes. That child has had us married off in her head since the Natural History Museum. Probably true. They told Sophie the next morning over breakfast. Daniel had made his signature terrible pancakes, and Sophie was drowning hers in syrup while explaining her new theory about sustainable agriculture on Mars. So if we use hydroponics combined with Martian soil... Wait, why are you both looking at me weird? Sophie glanced between them suspiciously. We want to ask you something important, Victoria said, suddenly nervous in a way Daniel rarely saw her. And you can take time to think about it, and it's completely your choice. Victoria wants to adopt you, Daniel interrupted because Victoria was spiraling. Make it official, so she'd be your legal parent, not just your stepmom. Sophie set down her fork carefully, her expression serious. Would I still see Mom? Of course, Victoria said quickly. This doesn't change anything with your mom. It just means you'd have 3 parents instead of 2. And I could call you Mom if I wanted, or still call you Victoria. Whatever feels right to you. Sophie thought about this for approximately 10 seconds. Then she launched herself out of her chair and threw her arms around Victoria. Yes, obviously yes. Can we tell Grandma and Grandpa? They're going to be so excited. Victoria hugged her back, crying again. Happy tears seemed to be her default setting these days. And Daniel watched his family expand and solidify into something permanent and real. The adoption paperwork took 3 months to process. Jennifer was surprisingly cooperative, perhaps because Marcus had proposed and she was focused on her own new beginning. Or perhaps because she recognized, however belatedly, that Sophie was thriving in ways she never had during the marriage. Either way, she signed the consent forms without drama. The wedding planning continued throughout summer, with Sophie maintaining detailed spreadsheets and vendor lists that would have impressed corporate project managers. She'd negotiated with caterers, researched venues, and somehow convinced a local observatory to let them use their grounds for the ceremony. Did you actually tell them it was for a wedding? Daniel asked, reviewing the contract Sophie had secured. I told them it was for a special event celebrating space exploration and family unity, which is technically true. Sophie looked entirely too pleased with herself. They gave us a discount because I told them about my Mars colonization plans, and they thought it was cute. You manipulated professional astronomers into giving you a venue discount. I prefer successfully negotiated. Victoria taught me that. Daniel looked at his fiancée, who was trying very hard not to laugh. She's your daughter now too, he said. You get to deal with the fact that she's apparently a criminal mastermind in training. I'm raising her right, Victoria said proudly. The final week before the wedding was chaos. Last-minute details, dress fittings, family arriving from out of town. Victoria's mother came in from Boston, a sharp-eyed woman in her 70s who looked exactly like an older version of her daughter. She studied Daniel with the same intense assessment Victoria had used when they first met. So you're the one who convinced my daughter to quit her job and get married, Mrs. Hale said over dinner the night before the ceremony. Mom, Victoria started, but her mother waved her off. I'm not criticizing, I'm observing. She turned back to Daniel. Victoria spent her whole life trying to prove something. To me, to herself, to everyone who said she couldn't do it. And she did prove it. Built an empire. Made herself untouchable. She paused. But she was also miserable. I could see it every time we talked. So whoever you are, whatever you did, thank you for giving me back my daughter. I didn't give her back, Daniel said carefully. She chose to come back. I just gave her a reason to want to. Mrs. Hale smiled for the first time. Good answer. You'll do fine. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. Early September weather that was warm without being hot, with a sky so clear that stars would be visible the moment the sun set. Sophie had checked the weather forecasts obsessively for weeks, and nature had apparently decided to cooperate. Daniel stood at the observatory with his father and Marcus Chen, who'd become a good friend despite the awkwardness of their professional history, watching the sun sink toward the horizon while guests arrived and took their seats on the lawn. "Nervous?" his father asked. "Terrified," Daniel admitted. "But in a good way. That's how you know it's right. If you weren't scared, you wouldn't care enough." His father clapped him on the shoulder. "I'm proud of you, son. You took something broken and built something beautiful." "I had help. We all need help. Trick is being smart enough to accept it." The ceremony was scheduled for sunset, Sophie's careful timing to allow for both natural light and visible stars. As the guests settled, Daniel took his place under an arch decorated with flowers and tiny lights that looked like constellations. His hands were shaking. Then the music started and Sophie appeared at the end of the aisle. She was wearing a navy blue dress covered in tiny embroidered stars, carrying a bouquet of white roses, looking absurdly grown up and still entirely herself. She walked down the aisle with perfect composure, took her place as junior bridesmaid, and gave Daniel a subtle thumbs up that made several guests chuckle. Then Victoria appeared, and Daniel forgot how to breathe. She was wearing a simple white dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated, her hair loose around her shoulders, carrying a bouquet of stars of Bethlehem flowers that Sophie had insisted on. She looked radiant, healthy, alive in every possible way. And she was looking at Daniel like he was the only person in the world who mattered. Her mother walked her down the aisle, and when they reached Daniel, Mrs. Hale kissed Victoria's cheek and whispered something that made Victoria laugh through sudden tears. The ceremony itself was a blur. Daniel heard himself say the words, heard Victoria's voice steady and clear as she made her vows, felt the cool slide of her wedding band joining the engagement ring on her finger. Somewhere in the middle, Sophie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to hide the fact that she was crying. "You may kiss your bride," the officiant announced, and Daniel pulled Victoria close, kissing her while their family and friends applauded and the first stars began appearing overhead. "Hi, wife," he whispered against her lips. "Hi, husband," she whispered back, smiling. The reception was exactly as Sophie had planned. Tables set up under the stars, a telescope available for guests who wanted to stargaze between courses, centerpieces that somehow incorporated both flowers and astronomical charts. It was wonderfully strange, perfectly them. During dinner, Sophie stood up and clinked her glass like she'd seen adults do at other weddings. The crowd quieted. "I'm supposed to give a toast," Sophie announced, suddenly looking younger and more nervous than Daniel had seen her in months. "I wrote a speech, but I lost it, so I'm just going to say what I remember." She took a deep breath. "A year ago, my dad was really sad. He tried to hide it, but I could tell. And I was sad too because my family was broken and I didn't know how to fix it." Her voice was steady despite the emotion in her eyes. Then Victoria showed up, and she was sick and scared, and Dad helped her, and she helped him. And somehow they helped each other become happy again. Sophie looked at Victoria, then at Daniel. "I used to think family was just the people you were born with, but I learned that family is the people who show up, who stay even when things are hard, who choose you every single day." She raised her glass of sparkling cider. "So here's to my dad and my new mom, who chose each other and chose me. Thank you for showing me what family really means." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Victoria was crying openly, and Daniel had to clear his throat several times before he could trust his voice. Sophie sat down looking pleased with herself, and the applause was thunderous. "That child is going to rule the world someday," Victoria said, wiping her eyes. "Probably," Daniel agreed. "We should start preparing now." They danced under the stars, first the traditional first dance, then Daniel with Sophie, then Victoria with Sophie, then all three of them together while guests laughed and took pictures. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely perfect. Later, when the reception was winding down and Sophie had fallen asleep on Mrs. Hale's lap, Daniel and Victoria stood at the telescope looking at Saturn's rings. "Can you believe we're actually married?" Victoria asked, her head on his shoulder. "Honestly, no. A year ago I was signing divorce papers thinking my life was over. Now I have you and Sophie and a future I actually want. Same. A year ago I was fighting cancer alone, convinced I'd die the same way I'd lived, isolated and afraid. She turned to face him. You saved my life, Daniel. We saved each other, he corrected. That's how this works. She kissed him, soft and sweet, and somewhere above them the stars wheeled through their ancient patterns, unchanged and unchanging, witnessing this small moment of human happiness. The years that followed were not without challenges. Victoria's cancer remained in remission, but the fear of recurrence lingered. Regular scans, maintenance medications, moments of anxiety whenever she felt unusually tired. Sophie navigated the complications of having three parents with varying degrees of grace, occasionally playing them against each other before they figured out her tactics. Daniel's career continued to grow, bringing new pressures and responsibilities, but they navigated it together. Victoria's community college course became so popular she expanded it to 3 sections, teaching financial literacy to students who'd never had access to that knowledge. She found more satisfaction in helping a single mother understand credit scores than she'd ever found in managing billion-dollar portfolios. Daniel made senior partner at 38, the youngest in the firm's history. He still managed the Donovan account, but he'd learned to set boundaries, to leave work at work, to prioritize the moments that actually mattered. Sophie thrived. She won the state science fair with her Mars habitat design, got early acceptance at MIT's aerospace engineering program, and somehow maintained perfect grades while also teaching kids astronomy at the community center every Saturday. The adoption was finalized when she was 9, and she started calling Victoria Mom without fanfare or discussion, like it had always been that way. 2 years after the wedding, Victoria's scans showed something suspicious. The fear crashed back immediately. That terrible suffocating certainty that the cancer had returned, that they'd borrowed time but the bill was coming due. Daniel held Victoria's hand in the oncologist's office, both of them silent with dread, while the doctor reviewed the images. It's scar tissue, the doctor finally said. Not cancer, just your body's response to the treatment. We'll monitor it, but you're still in full remission. They cried together in the parking lot, relief and residual fear and gratitude all tangled together. That night, Sophie found them on the couch holding each other, and she crawled between them without asking, pressing close like she used to when she was younger. We're okay, Victoria assured her. False alarm. I'm okay. I know, Sophie said, but I wanted to be close anyway. So they sat together, the 3 of them, and Daniel thought about how fear never completely went away, but you learned to live alongside it. How love didn't eliminate uncertainty, but it made uncertainty bearable. How family wasn't about perfection, but about showing up for each other in the imperfect moments. On Sophie's 16th birthday, she announced she'd been accepted into an early college program for gifted students. It meant she'd leave for MIT the following year, at 17, to begin her aerospace engineering degree. I know it's early, she said, nervous about their reaction, and I'll miss you both. But this is my dream, and I have to chase it. Of course you do, Victoria said immediately. Dreams don't wait for convenient timing. We're proud of you, sweetheart, Daniel added, terrified of how fast you're growing up, but proud. You raised me to be independent, Sophie pointed out. Doesn't mean we have to like it when you actually become independent, Daniel said, making her laugh. The year Sophie left for college was harder than any of them expected. The apartment felt too quiet without her constant presence, her enthusiastic explanations of orbital mechanics, her organized chaos of homework and telescope parts, and Mars mission planning documents. But it also gave Daniel and Victoria time to rediscover each other as a couple, not just as parents. They traveled, something neither had done much before. They took cooking classes and were terrible at it, which somehow made it more fun. They learned to dance properly instead of just swaying at their wedding. They built a life that had room for just the 2 of them while still maintaining space for Sophie when she came home. 5 years after the wedding, on their anniversary, Victoria told Daniel she had something important to discuss. He immediately tensed, old fears about cancer returning surfacing before he could stop them. I'm fine, Victoria said quickly, reading his expression. Completely healthy. This is good news. I promise. Okay, Daniel said carefully. What is it? I've been thinking about going back to work. Not at Wellington and Cross, but starting my own consulting firm. Small businesses, nonprofits, People who need financial expertise but can't afford the big firms. She watched him carefully. It would mean long hours sometimes. Travel. Less flexibility than I have now teaching. Do you want to do it? Daniel asked. I think so. I miss the challenge sometimes. Not the corporate politics, but the problem solving. The strategy. Using my skills to actually help people build something sustainable. She paused. But only if you're okay with it. If it wouldn't disrupt our life too much. Daniel pulled her close. Victoria, I didn't fall in love with you so you could stop being yourself. If you want to start a consulting firm, start a consulting firm. We'll figure out the logistics. She kissed him, grateful and relieved. What if I fail? Then you fail and try something else. But I don't think you will. She didn't. Victoria's consulting firm grew slowly but steadily, built on reputation and results rather than flashy marketing. She worked with immigrant entrepreneurs, community organizations, women trying to start businesses after years out of the workforce. It was challenging and rewarding and nothing like her previous career, which made it perfect. Sophie called home every Sunday without fail, updating them on her research, her classes, her growing involvement in actual NASA projects. She'd inherited Victoria's strategic mind and Daniel's empathy, combining them into something formidable. At 19, she was already publishing papers about sustainable Mars colonization. At 21, she was selected for a competitive NASA internship. You know she's actually going to make it to Mars someday, Victoria said, watching Sophie give a presentation via video call about her latest project. I know, Daniel said. Terrifies me, but I know. We raised her too well. We raised her exactly right. On Sophie's 22nd birthday, she called with news that made them both scream with joy. She'd been selected as a candidate for the Artemis program, the stepping stone toward Mars missions. It was years away still, contingent on dozens of factors, but she was on the path. I told you, Sophie said, grinning at them through the video screen. 10 years ago, I told you I'd apply and I'd make it. You should have believed me. We always believed you, Victoria said, crying happy tears again. Some things never changed. Mom, you're crying at everything these days. What's going on? Victoria glanced at Daniel, who nodded. They'd agreed to tell Sophie together. We have news too, Victoria said. I'm pregnant. The silence on the other end was absolute. Then Sophie's face split into the biggest smile Daniel had ever seen. Are you serious? You're having a baby? But I thought, the cancer treatment? So did we. Turns out miracles happen sometimes. Victoria's hand moved to her still flat stomach. I'm 12 weeks along. Everything looks healthy so far. I'm going to have a little brother or sister. Sophie was practically bouncing. This is amazing. Wait, you're how old, Mom? 47, which is why every doctor I've seen has mentioned my advanced maternal age approximately 1,000 times. But you're healthy. Completely. Regular monitoring, low-risk pregnancy so far. We're cautiously optimistic. They talked for another hour, Sophie already making plans to come home for the birth, offering to help with childcare, suggesting names that all had some connection to astronomy. When they finally hung up, Daniel pulled Victoria close. You okay? He asked. I know you're trying to stay calm, but you're allowed to be excited. I'm terrified, Victoria admitted. I spent so many years thinking this wasn't possible, and now that it is, I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. You can't promise that. You're right, I can't. He kissed her forehead. But I can promise I'll be with you every step, just like before. And we'll face whatever comes together. The pregnancy was closely monitored due to Victoria's age and medical history, but she remained healthy throughout. She worked until her 7th month, then reluctantly agreed to slow down when her doctor suggested it. Daniel rearranged his schedule to work from home more often, and they prepared for this unexpected addition to their family. Sophie came home for spring break looking older, more confident, completely herself. She set up her old telescope on the balcony and spent an evening showing them new constellations, her hand occasionally moving to rest on Victoria's growing belly. I can't believe I'm going to be a big sister at 22, she said. This is so weird. Tell me about it, Victoria laughed. I'm having a baby at 47. That's definitely weird. Good weird, though, Sophie said firmly. The best weird. The baby, a boy they named James, after Victoria's father, was born on a clear October evening. The delivery was complicated but successful, And when Daniel finally held his son, tiny and perfect and completely overwhelming, he couldn't stop crying. "We made another human," he said to Victoria, who was exhausted but glowing. "We did, and this time I get to be here from the beginning." She touched James's tiny hand. "I get to do all the things I thought I'd missed my chance at." Sophie arrived at the hospital the next morning, still in her NASA internship t-shirt, and spent an hour just staring at her baby brother with wonder. "He's so small," she whispered. "Was I ever that small?" "Smaller," Daniel said. "You were a tiny thing. And now I'm going to Mars and he's just being born. That's so strange. By the time he's my age, I might already be there." "Send us postcards," Victoria said sleepily. "I'll send you rocks, Martian rocks. He can put them on his desk and tell people his sister went to space." They brought James home to an apartment that had been child-proofed by Sophie, with the same meticulous attention she applied to everything. Daniel watched Victoria navigate new motherhood, the sleepless nights, the constant feeding, the overwhelming responsibility, with the same fierce determination she'd brought to beating cancer. "I'm too old for this," Victoria said one night at 3 a.m., rocking a crying James while looking completely exhausted. "You're perfect for this," Daniel countered, taking the baby so she could rest. "And we're doing it together." "I don't remember Sophie being this hard." "That's because you met Sophie when she was already 8 and sleeping through the night." "Good point." Victoria watched Daniel sway with James, finally getting him to settle. "You're good at this. Practice. Plus, I actually liked the baby stage this time. With Sophie, I was so worried about doing everything wrong that I couldn't enjoy any of it. Now I know that babies are resilient and will probably mess up constantly, and that's okay." "When did you get so wise?" "Married up, learned from my wife." James grew from a tiny newborn into a laughing baby who seemed fascinated by everything, especially his big sister's telescope. Sophie came home every chance she could, balancing her NASA work with family time, determined not to miss James's milestones despite her demanding schedule. On James's first birthday, they gathered in Daniel and Victoria's backyard, expanded from the original apartment into a house they'd bought in the suburbs, with room for a proper telescope and a garden Victoria had started cultivating. Sophie held James while he smashed cake everywhere, and Daniel took pictures that would never quite capture the perfection of the moment. "I have an announcement," Sophie said once James was cleaned up and happily destroying a new toy. "I've been selected for the Mars mission. I'm going." The silence was absolute. Then Victoria started crying, and Daniel was hugging Sophie. And James was confused by all the emotion but laughing anyway because everyone else seemed happy. "When?" Victoria managed. 3 years. Training starts next month. The mission launches in 36 months. Sophie looked at James. "You'll be 4. I'll miss so much of you growing up." "But you'll be making history," Daniel said, pride and fear and wonder all mixed together. "You'll be doing exactly what you've dreamed of since you were 8 years old." "I know, and I'm terrified and excited, and I can't believe this is real." Sophie wiped her eyes. "But it is real. I'm going to Mars. And when I get there, I'll name a crater after our family, Carter Hale Crater. How does that sound?" "Perfect," Victoria said. "Absolutely perfect." The 3 years before Sophie's launch were a blur. They celebrated milestones, Sophie's NASA selection ceremony, James's first words, Victoria's 50th birthday, Daniel's promotion to managing partner. They navigated challenges, James's terrible twos, the stress of Sophie's intensive training, the constant background fear that something might derail the Mars mission. But they faced it all together, this family they'd built from broken pieces and second chances, and the courage to choose each other when choosing each other was hard. The day of Sophie's launch, they stood at Cape Canaveral with thousands of other people. James on Daniel's shoulders, Victoria holding Daniel's hand so tightly it hurt. Sophie had said her goodbyes the night before, tearful, loving, full of promises to send messages from Mars and come home safe. "She's really doing this," Victoria said as the countdown began. "She really is," Daniel agreed. "We raised her well. We raised her to chase impossible dreams. This is what that looks like." The rocket launched in a blast of fire and sound, carrying Sophie and 5 other astronauts toward the International Space Station where they'd prepare for the actual Mars journey. Daniel watched it climb into the sky, that bright point of light getting smaller and smaller, and thought about how far they'd all come from that parking garage morning when he thought his life was over. James waved at the disappearing rocket. "Bye, Sophie, bye!" "She'll be back," Victoria promised, picking up James. "In 4 years, she'll come back to us. And in the meantime, we have videos to watch, and messages to receive, and a life to live while she's gone," Daniel added. "Right, buddy?" James nodded seriously, though at 4 he probably didn't fully understand where his sister had gone or how long she'd be away. But he would. They'd make sure he grew up knowing his sister was extraordinary, that she'd chosen to do something impossible, that family meant supporting each other's dreams even when those dreams took you 40 million miles away. They drove home from Cape Canaveral as a family of 3, but still whole, still connected by the bonds they'd chosen to build and maintain. That night, Daniel and Victoria sat on their back deck while James slept inside, looking up at the stars where their daughter was heading. "I never thought I'd have this," Victoria said softly. "Any of this. A husband who loves me, children, a life that feels worth living." "I never thought I'd find love again after my divorce," Daniel replied. "Thought I'd just focus on being a good father to Sophie, and that would be enough. And now? Now I have everything I didn't know I needed. A wife who challenges me and loves me. 2 children who amaze me every day. A career I'm proud of. A life built on honesty instead of pretending." Victoria leaned into him. "We did good, didn't we? We did better than good. We took broken pieces and built something beautiful." They sat together under the stars, and Daniel thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that first morning when Victoria had asked him to drive her to treatment, through months of fear and fighting and uncertainty, to cancer remission and wedding vows and Sophie's adoption and James's unexpected arrival, and now this, their daughter traveling to Mars while they built a life worth returning to. It hadn't been easy. There had been moments when Daniel wondered if they'd make it, times when the complications seemed insurmountable, days when fear threatened to overwhelm hope. But they'd chosen each other through all of it, chosen to show up, to stay, to fight for what they were building together. And that choice had made all the difference. Years later, when Sophie stood on Martian soil and looked up at Earth, a distant blue dot in the alien sky, she thought about her family, about her father who'd taught her that broken things could be made whole again, about her mother who'd shown her that it's never too late to choose differently, about her little brother who was growing up in a world where his big sister was a Mars explorer, about the love that had built her family from impossibility and maintained it through distance and time. She sent a message home, knowing it would take minutes to arrive, but trusting it would get there. "Made it. Safe. Thinking of you all. Carter Hale Crater officially named and recognized. Love you. See you in 4 years." Back on Earth, in a house filled with photographs and telescope parts, and James's artwork covering the refrigerator, Daniel and Victoria received the message. James was 7 now, proudly telling everyone his sister was on Mars. They gathered around the screen to read Sophie's words, and Daniel felt that same overwhelming gratitude he'd felt on their wedding day when James was born, every morning when he woke up next to Victoria. They'd started as 2 broken people in a parking garage in a hospital corridor, both convinced their best days were behind them. They'd found each other in the quiet act of showing up, in the simple choice to help someone who needed it, in the courage to be honest about fear and hope and longing. And from that small beginning, they'd built a life, messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. A life where cancer could be survived, where broken families could be rebuilt, where 8-year-old girls who dreamed of Mars could actually get there. A life worth fighting for, worth choosing, worth living fully instead of just surviving. Daniel pulled Victoria close while James drew pictures of his sister's spacecraft, and he thought about how the story could have ended differently, how easily he could have stayed in that parking garage, drowning in despair, how Victoria could have fought her battle alone and won nothing but survival, how they could have missed each other entirely, 2 ships passing in the night, never knowing what they'd lost. But they hadn't missed each other. They'd found each other at exactly the right moment, when both were desperate enough to be honest and brave enough to hope. And from that finding, they'd built everything that mattered. It wasn't the life Daniel had planned when he was younger. It wasn't the future Victoria had imagined when she was climbing corporate ladders and building empires. It was better than either of them could have dreamed because it was real and hard-won and chosen every single day. And in the end, that was enough. more than enough. It was everything.